Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting, Stratford District Council. My name's Councillor Stuart Keithley. I shall be your chairman this evening. First of all, I've just got some housekeeping to run through. So, in terms of fire alarms and such like, there's no fire alarm scheduled tonight, so if the alarm does go, we do need to get out, and that will be through the bottom from here, left-hand corner of the building, out the front door, and the assembly point is in the car park of the Windmill Pub. Just a reminder that this is a meeting in public. It's not a public meeting. It's going to be live streamed and recorded. So members and officers, please, when you're speaking, please remember to have the microphone in front of you and the microphone turned on so that we get a good recording. The same will be for public speakers as well. I'll come on to that in a second. Right, so I can introduce the top table tonight. On the left, Olivia Quinn from Democratic Services, Amy Shipley, our legal advisor, Richard Gardner, senior planner, Alice Cosnett and Joe Brooke at the back. They're our case officers. And Alex Follis, who's joining us from the urban design team here at Stratford District Council. Richard, I think you've got a statement to make, which you prepared earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just to confirm that my role here tonight is to provide impartial advice and to assist members in their decision taking. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Richard. Now, we've got some speakers tonight, applicants and I think parish council. So when it's your time to speak, I shall introduce you up to the table. Some of you might have done it before. You just need to put the microphone on. And I'll let you know at that point how long you've got to speak. And we would normally give you a 30-second warning to the end of your time. Okay? So, on to the agenda then. Olivia, do we have apologies for absence, please?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Olivia. And item 2 is disclosures of interest. Well, I'll just start by saying that I think we've all had a blanket email to all of us on item 4 in Alderminster. Would that be right? So could you note that, please, Amy? And from perspective of some of us, we had a site visit this afternoon to Timothy's Bridge Road to look at items 3 and 4. Could you just indicate who was there for the purposes of the meeting? Thank you very much. So that's the site visit. Are there any further disclosures of interest? Councillor Parry.
Thank you and good evening, Chair. I just wish to declare that I do know one of the speakers this evening, Mr. Oliver Spicer, in connection with the 2 applications this evening. However, I come to the committee with an open mind. Okay,
thank you, Councillor Parry. Anybody else? No, that looks all clear. Okay, so we can move on to the planning applications. And first of all, we've got item 3 on the agenda. It's application 2303270. Bridge House 3 Timothy's Bridge Road, and the presenting officer for this is Alice Cosnett. Alice, if you'd like to take us through the application, please. Over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. The application site, as identified by the black dot in the centre of the plan, is located in Stratford-upon-Avon's built-up area boundary. The application site is outlined in red. The canal is denoted by the blue shading and the railway line by the thick purple line. The application site forms part of the Canal Quarter Regeneration Zone, which is allocated for redevelopment under proposal SUA1 of the core strategy and policy SSB1 of the Stratford-upon-Avon NDP. This plan is taken from the Canal Quarter Regeneration Zone Framework Master Plan SPD and shows the entirety of the land allocated under proposal SUA1 outlined in red. The yellow star in roughly the middle of the slide identifies the location of the application site. Full planning permission is sought under this application for the erection of a wholly residential apartment block comprising 89 1- and 2-bed units. 25% would be affordable, offered at 60% of open market value. Here you can see the site plan, which shows a linear plaque along the south side of the building adjacent to the canal, park to the east of the building, and vehicular access from Timothy's Bridge Road to the north. The internal access road would lead to 2 stories of basement parking. The southern canal side elevation can be seen here. It ranges from between 4 and 7 stories, with the majority being at 6. At its tallest, it measures approximately 22 metres in height, and at its widest, approximately 60 metres. The majority would be finished in buff brick, with the taller element in red brick, as well as zinc cladding to the upper floor. And here, just to run the elevations through with your members, here we've got the eastern elevation, so you can see the canal on the left-hand side of the slide, and Timothy's Bridge Road would be over on the right. And then we've got the western elevation, and finally the northern elevation. So this is the elevation which would face toward Timothy's Bridge Road. This slide shows the proposed development, the coloured building on the right, in the context of the pending application on land to the west, which members will note is next to be heard on tonight's agenda. The greyed out buildings to the left and at the back of the slide have been granted planning permission but have not been built out as yet. The canal side elevation of the granted scheme can be seen on the following slide. So that's the building on the left-hand side there. This is what was granted under reference 22/00682 Vary as a landmark building. The elevation fronting the canal would have a height of approximately 20 metres. This plan is taken from the Canal Quarter Regeneration Zone SPD and identifies locations for landmark buildings. Members will note that an L is in the location of the consented building to the west of the site. So if you can see my cursor, it's this blue L here. No landmark is identified at the application site location, which is approximately where the star is located. As advised previously, parking would be provided across 2 stories of basement parking, and these are the floor plans here. And then I've just got an example floor plan of the building here. So turning to the photos, so this is taken from Timothy's Bridge Road. So here we're stood on the vehicular and pedestrian bridge which crosses the canal. The site is just beyond the 2 buildings that can be seen in the centre of the photo. In a similar location, this shows the relationship of the site to the canal, its towpath, and the commercial development to the southern side of the canal, which is largely shielded from view by mature vegetation. This fencing fronts the canal towpath, and beyond it, members will note that whilst a commercial building once occupied the site, it's been demolished and the site is currently vacant. And this shows the current condition of the site. The houses that can be seen in the distance are beyond the railway line to the north. Here we're stood on the bend on Timothy's Bridge Road, looking toward the site, which is just beyond the building's roof that can be seen. So this grey roof here, the application site is just beyond that. And here a photo looking back the other way along Timothy's Bridge Road to give members some context of the wider allocated area. Members should note that there are a couple of updates on the update sheet. As per the conclusion on pages 28 and 29 of your committee agenda, the harms and benefits of the scheme have been weighed in the planning balance. The benefits are not considered to outweigh the harms identified, and so the application is recommended for refusal for the 4 reasons detailed on pages 30 and 31 of your agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much for that, Alice. Okay, so we have some speakers on this application. Registered James Campbell and Oliver Spicer. If you'd like to come up, please. We have 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Do you want to get it? Right. I understand you've asked for the little 3D model to be available. Is that right? Yeah. Well, Richard will go and get it. So how do you think you're going to play the 3 minutes? Right, okay, that's fine. So we'll give you 30 seconds in. Yeah. Yeah. some of us have. Having taken advice before this, I think when we get onto your questions, if members want to just come up and have a look at that model, then that might be the right time to do that. So I think we'll do that. So anyway, when you're ready, over to you and tell us about the application.
Thank you. Okay. WSP Developments is a local firm. I'm the director of that and will oversee this project through to its build and will employ a significant local workforce. The site has an extant permission for 32 apartments, and that's why we've demolished existing buildings that were there. This has surface car parking, no public access, and there are no public benefits such as affordable housing or any financial contributions. This scheme will need to be built out as an alternative to this if we don't move forward. The proposal before you this evening is for 89 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, and they provide a fully compliant affordable housing provision, parking, sustainable construction methods, including the first full blue roof that positively reduces water runoff in Stratford district, a 2-tier basement providing parking for every apartment in the building, and storage and cycle storage. Visitor parking and deliveries are all accommodated on the ground floor to minimise any congestion. The scheme is designed to enable the connection to the district heating system when it's in place from the district council, and before then we will use renewable electricity and air source heating. The proposal for the 1- and 2-bedroom apartments has significant public benefits that have not been given the same or similar weight that have been approved as part of the Berkeley scheme in 2020, such as increased B&G, provision of much needed 1- and 2-bedroom properties instead of 5- or 4-bedroom properties. It fundamentally enables the start of the regeneration of this canal quarter, which hasn't started in the last 5 years because of the frontage that this site has fronting onto the canal. It's a huge benefit for this scheme. It enables Berkeley or any other Homes England, whoever it might be, to bring the remainder of those 650 units that you've identified to be delivered by 2031, 5 years ago, and not a single dwelling has been built. These are all similar to those that were put in the report of the Berkeley scheme, but have been given a very different summary. However, we seem to think that this is a much, much bigger weighting in terms of the public benefits. We're looking to pay the full Section 106 costs, and we've agreed to that in writing. We're happy to sign up to the Section 106 as a condition to this application. 2 key reasons have been raised in terms of the design, the scale, and the impact it has on the wider setting. Fundamentally, in the application summary, it states that the design and the scale of the proposals are not in context with their setting, their immediate setting, which is a building site, it's a wasteland. We're looking to improve that. We're looking to create something truly exceptional here. And the standard of the proposals put forward will be the benchmark for future development of this site and this entire area. It will create the area in itself. The scheme is also designed to transition from the approved 7 stories of Berkeley. A very modest 2-storey or 3-storey building wouldn't sit correctly against the 7 stories that are already built. We're looking to transition from that.
Could you wrap up now, because we're at about 3 minutes, thanks.
So, in summary, we're looking for you to reconsider the public benefits, reconsider the quality of design, and reconsider approving the application and enabling the canal quarter to come forward within this plan period. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so now's an opportunity for members to ask you questions, and members could leave their seats and come up if they needed an explanation to come and have a look at your 3D model. So who'd like to start? Looks like Councillor Parry has a question. Councillor Parry, please.
Thank you, and good evening to you both. I just wonder whether you can explain why you decided perhaps against going down the pre-application route, because I understand that there's been no pre-app on this particular scheme, and bearing in mind the scale and the size, and particularly as it was put in, the application was put in, believe it or not, in 2023, and we're now 2025. It would be helpful to have an understanding why you felt you didn't want to go down the pre-app route. And then I have a further question, if I may.
So there's a number of issues here. We took pre-application advice as an architectural practice in Studio Spicer back in 2020, but with a different developer. at the time. I won't say who they are today, but with Alice Cosnet, we took we had a full pre-application response to a similar scheme, not this scheme in particular, but a similar scheme. That developer wasn't able to take the scheme forward because it didn't financially make sense, so the scheme was on hold. We have a sister company, development business, and the landowner said, can we work with them and develop the site forward and bring it forward? At that point in time, we were looking at a smaller scale, which is the extant scheme for 32, I think it's what's on the slide actually, just up there. So you'll see all the car parking, fencing, no public space, no public parkway, no linear park on the canal. And we said, actually, let's stop. We were contacted as a practice by the adjacent site landowner or owner and asked if we could consider their site as part of it and how we could look at the entirety as a architectural firm, this is. So we did that at that stage. We had a discussion with the officer, Josh Cooper, I might have that wrong, who did the PDZA scheme, and we had a fairly detailed response from them. It wasn't a formal pre-app, it was a fairly detailed response on design, of which I think we have a slide, Alice, if you could provide it on there, of the ZA scheme, of the elevation. I think is there an elevation of there? Oh, it got taken out. Okay. One of the things in the ZA scheme is like they raised in the summary report and the officer's report, it noted that the design was of high quality. So we have taken that language of that report, taken the language of that design, and we've extended it, and we've provided quite a detailed narrative of how we've used that on a larger building and how we've continued that quality through this proposal. We've also, the complicated thing here is making this work financially. The fact that we wanted to provide, and we said this from the outset, we didn't want to have a viability assessment that said, oh, we can't provide affordable housing, as Berkeley have, 650 dwellings, only 11 affordable houses. We said we want to provide a full compliant scheme, and to do that we've had to put a 2-storey basement, we've had to go higher, so the overall numbers pays for the overall amount of accommodation. You know, it's been a scales, if you like, we're weighing up all the time. You know, this doesn't meet, the report that was provided doesn't meet 20% profit, which is the standardised profit rating, but we're a small local company who want to create something in Stratford. You know, that's what we've set out to do here.
Thank you. Can I just come back with a supplementary, if I may?
Yes, of course, Councillor Perry.
Could you just confirm the height differential between this particular proposal and the landmark building that the case officer made reference, that sits not adjacent but fairly close by?
If I could ask Alice, if there was a slide in your show where you showed the 3 or 4 buildings as a canal side elevation, it's quite helpful. One of the key things to understand, members, is the contours of the site. So from the landmark area, which is identified, is, if you like, the top of the bridge crossing, it's much higher. It's 4 metres, 5 metres higher in, and you can see on that image there, the building that Alice very kindly mentioned was 20 metres adjacent to the canal, actually rises up to the front to where it meets Timothy Bridge Road by about 5 metres. So as you can see, it's considerably higher than our proposals. We are higher than the building on the left-hand side that faces the canal, but at the same point, we followed the Town Council's guidance to have a mansard roof, which was set back. Originally, the proposals were vertical, and they've asked us to recede them, which meant we reduced the scheme by additionally 3 dwellings that they couldn't fit in there in terms of the space standards. So we reduced the number of dwellings from 92 to 89 by making the changes that they were supportive of.
Okay, Councillor Parry. Another question, Councillor Adam, you indicated.
Yeah, I was actually sort of intrigued by the 3D relief. I'll come and have a look in a second. But presumably that shows the whole scheme wider than the site. How does that represent the area?
Just to let you know how we've made this, we use a drone, 3D scanned it by video, so it's as accurate as we can make it from that. All the surrounding contours and textures can be a bit woolly and what have you, but that's just how the video is taken. The buildings here have been modelled, our buildings are actually modelled so that we know they're exactly accurate and laid on the site. These buildings are modelled from the drawings that were taken from the planning portal, so we know they're accurate. And you'll see considerably how much higher it is from the drone footage. The drone footage picks up all the contours. You know, I would be surprised if it's more than a metre out in terms of tolerance, but I haven't got any knowledge to support that in terms of what we've got. As you can see on this model, you see the height difference is quite considerable. This has come from the planning portal information that we've stitched together to put everything in that sense. It's also worth noting on that plan, on the SPD, it notes there are 11 landmark buildings, and they are guide, like in any SPD. You know, the number of housing in there is about 1,000, but actually more around 1,000 is going to be in a quarter of that area. So it's kind of a guideline to it rather than a hard and fast rule.
Chair, with your permission, can I go and have a quick look at the model?
Are there further questions? Okay. Okay. It's not a free-for-all. It's fine. Councillor Harvey, you have a question for the applicant. Do you want to just hold on a second while the other members have a look at this and they explain it? Yeah. Well, yeah, you don't want a conversation so much as you could point out where the application site is, please, Mr. Spicer, to the members that haven't seen it. The reason is just simply that if there were conversations, then we couldn't pick them up on the microphones. So it's as simple as that, really. So we have a question from Councillor Harvey. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Spicer. There's an important sentence on page 11 of the officer's report, which for the benefit of those watching, I'll read. It says, as a general observation, it's clear that the Council's urban designer does not consider a comprehensive review of the policy, guidance and planning history has been undertaken to fully inform the development proposal for the site, or that a comprehensive analysis of the local built form has been undertaken. How do you respond to that sentence, please?
So we applied for this application in November 2023. And the urban designer for the district council wasn't employed at that stage. And the application went through to, I think, the early part of 24, and the urban designer then was employed and fed back to the application at that point. So prior to that, there wasn't an urban designer, I don't understand, at the authority who gave any advice on it. In terms of the assessment, we had fairly detailed discussions once Alex was involved with the local authority and had reviewed the application that was placed. There was a significant downtime, during 2024 in the summer, where 3 or 4 months passed with literally no communication whatsoever. So it's a fairly difficult point of communication. We have prepared a very thorough assessment of Stratford in terms of character, conservation area, which is part of this discussion. This site is just under 1 kilometre away from the conservation area. We had some slides which showed key views from it. We've done a very, very thorough analysis of why we've detailed the building, why we've created the scale, the different setbacks. I think if it on the elevation of the elevations we proposed, if you see them, there's a detailed elevation, 1 to 20 or so, and you'll see the detail of the brickwork, if you like, reflects the character of the area. It's the character of that particular area at the moment is a wasteland. There's 12.5 acres of demolished wasteland trapped by the canal on one side and industrial buildings, and on the other side there's a railway line. So we're not looking to reflect that immediate setting, which is also noted in the officer's report, for a reason that we don't reflect the immediate setting of the character. We're looking to set a new benchmark. We're looking to use the traditional architecture language of the area of Warwickshire or Stratford, and we're looking to translate that into a modern building that's fit for purpose, that is sustainable, that will be here for a long-lasting period of time, that also transitions from the approved scheme. Hopefully, at some point, Berkeley or another developer will bring that forward with us, and we'll complete this canal quarter together. We don't want to build a building on our own here. We want the other developers to join us, and we've had discussions. We've been very open for 3 years with these guys. We've been talking to them about how we can develop this site, how we can work with them in terms of the road infrastructure, the drainage infrastructure. We're not a closed book. We've been very open with them all, and there's a huge amount of constraints for us all to work with to enable this to come forward. If Berkeley were going to deliver their scheme, they would have delivered it by now.
Okay, thank you for that. Your follow-up? You're looking at me, Councillor Harvey, as if you've got something.
Put it this way. The urban designer's comment is that he doubts whether a comprehensive review has been undertaken as part of the preparation process. From what you've just said, I'm interpreting that as you think that a comprehensive review was undertaken. Is that a fair conclusion?
We certainly did do a very detailed review and analysis before we started where we were. As I mentioned just slightly earlier on, we actually looked at this site as an architectural practice for an alternative developer where we did an earlier assessment to precurse this scheme. So we have done significant analysis and research into developing this site. We differ in our views with the urban designer, and we've had those conversations along the process. We differ. We've put our evidence forward to why we think this is a more successful scheme. This is a scheme that reflects the canal nature, and it's a very difficult site to develop insofar as to be able to be addressable on all four sides. We've improved the site as much as possible, but this is a site which is to be part of the canal quarter. This isn't a site which is going to be part of any other development anywhere else, and therefore would have those characteristics.
Thank you. Mr. Spicer, I'll just probably finish you there, so sticking to the question and to the concise answer. Councillor Eden, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. A couple of things around the sort of master plan SPD. To be fair, Councillor Harvey asked quite a lot of what I was going to ask, so this might seem a bit muddled, so bear with me. There are a couple of shortfalls identified within the report versus that. The two that I've still got in my head are how this might detract from a landmark building that admittedly isn't there at the moment, but building two large buildings next to it would take that away. And then the second question is around things like the allocated parking falling short from our normal SPDs and things like that. Obviously, you're making a scheme work, but would you like to talk to either of those points?
So if I just kick off on the parking note, the adjacent scheme that was approved, the Berkeley scheme, as we've referred it to, is we've essentially matched the parking for that. So there's at least one parking space per flat, and given the sort of highly sustainable nature of the location, that has been considered appropriate level for the being able to walk into town and all the local amenities that are available in that area.
In terms of landmark buildings, you just raised, not just to miss that. As I mentioned earlier, there are 11 landmark buildings in less than 12 acres. There is going to be some transition in between those buildings. The overall master plan is yet to be fully approved insofar as reserve matters. But insofar as this application, the area has been identified as a landmark area to be visible from parts of Stratford. That's what the landmark building was identified for. Landmark sites have been identified for. They've been identified so they can be visible from further afield to mark out this is the canal quarter. If I'm correct in saying that the SPD just kind of used the AMEC building, the former AMEC building, as its kind of precedent. The fact that it was seen as like an identifiable building as you entered the town, and they wanted to have the same kind of addressable buildings as you did that. But they're on multiple scales. If you're driving in from Birmingham Road, the mini garage into town, and you see the AMEC building, you can resonate with that scale, and you will with the Berkeley building. But if you're walking up the canal, you're a human being on your push bike or with your dog or with your children, you're going to have an enormous building staring down on you. So our building and our proposals are about addressing the transition from that, like a hinge. It hinges away from that iconic building or landmark building. For the people that are going to use that area and going to live there, we've created parks and public and private spaces that surround it to allow you to actually use it and benefit from it. Otherwise, it's just the people driving in and out of Stratford again.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Councillor Scorer.
Thank you, Chair. On the elevation, we can see, is there going to be a plant room on top of the roof?
No. So all the plant and services, as I mentioned earlier, based on like sustainability and renewable energy, they are within the building in the basement. Part of this building is to try and make it so it's most efficient for the people that use it. So the external elevations all have a private balcony amenity space for all of the residents, so they can, have, as well as external space. And you'll see just on the right-hand side of the lower block, that's a raised private garden space that would suit 50 to 60 people that could use that and benefit from a private space overlooking the canal. That could also benefit looking at the landmark building from there. So it's all of the external spaces have been really trying to benefit those that use it and the people that are going to be near it.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there further questions? There are. Councillor Parry.
Sorry, Chair. Mr. Spicer, from a design perspective, can you advise why you've gone with particularly one very large building when you've got the small building to the left? And I'm just wondering, had there been any consideration to almost, because that's looks to the layman 2.5 times the size of the one that is obviously following. But I'm just wondering, had there been any considerations to sort of have an interlinked building that kind of looked as though it was two, with perhaps, because it is a large building, had there been any considerations from a design perspective? Perhaps there are architectural reasons why it made more sense to make it one large one than perhaps.
It's a very good question, and just go back to your earlier point when we talked about how we chose the pre-application routes that we've gone down. When we were dealing with the application for the PD of 32 units, we had a rough scheme drawn for a larger scheme that we spoke with the officer in our office with at the time, and we had the kind of right-hand building was broken in two, and it had a sky garden between, almost like a bridge, if you like, at the first floor and the third floor, and the feedback was that it felt industrial, and that the space below it would be all the windows of the apartments underneath it would be overshadowed by it, by both of them. So they were, and we tried to look at options where we could design them out. So the preference was for a more efficient building core to have like a greater amount of external parking spaces around it and garden spaces. So we've made it as efficient as possible. It's about an 88% efficiency of ratio of core to external area, which is, you're normally getting things like tower blocks because they are so efficient, like squares. It's a really efficient floor plate.
Okay, thank you for that. So hopefully that answers your question. Councillor Padgham has a question. I'll come to you next, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive answers. Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, actually. The first one is just related, sorry, I just need to go back over the parking. I know you say you've got one space for each unit, but obviously 59 of them are two-bed units. I understand you're saying about the sustainability of the location. However, how would you compensate for that if, for example, you have somebody who needs 2 parking spaces, or has like a couple who might have 2 cars? Because this area you do need to generally use a car, unfortunately. I know we're trying to move away from that, but the reality is we're not there yet. So how would you compensate? Because parking is always an issue.
So we're unable to provide any more parking within the 2 basement levels we've already got. And as part of the application, I think you may have seen, I'm not sure how we provided a viability assessment, which to demonstrate why a meeting many months ago we were asked to, if viability would demonstrate, could we reduce the height of the building and therefore make it more appeasing in terms of the scale and mass, the reasons you've got today. And financially it isn't possible. And even reducing a basement level, it didn't make it possible. So to add another basement level in, say a 3-storey basement, and provide additional parking, it just wouldn't be viable as it stands. So we've made as much parking as possible within the viability model that's there. We cannot put any further parking in. We put parking on the ground floor for visitor spaces and for delivery like Amazon or DPD, and we've got collection boxes inside the foyers for that kind of thing, to minimise kind of clutter, if you like, at ground level. But there isn't any more ability in space without losing landscape or public benefits externally.
Thank you, Mr. Spicer. Follow-up question, yeah, of course.
Sorry, this is on something different. In the officer's report, it says that the building has not been designed to be future-proof to allow connection to the future district heat network. But I think you said that it is designed to.
We are fully committed. When that facility is available, we'd be more than happy for that to be integrated. And we said that our meetings that we've had, more than happy to have that the facility is completely electric, so there's no gas, which makes it more than adaptable to be connected to a district heat system. I think the stage where we're at, the district council, which are aiming to provide the facility at very early stages. So we haven't designed it to be solely reliant on it because it wouldn't be deliverable.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Harvey, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 9 of the officer's report makes the point that policy requires or expects that the new development along the canal should be residential and up to 4 stories in height, unless there are specific and clear justification for taller development. What would you put forward as specific and clear justification for taller development beyond 4 stories?
It's a very, very good question. Well, there's a, in terms of design, placemaking, and good quality, transitioning from a 7 to 22 metre building, 23 metre building, which is approved already, to any new development, there needs to be a kind of architectural language that links those buildings. There needs to be a connection between them, so you don't just transition from big lumps across an open space where you create inhumane, living accommodation. So architecturally, there's a strong reason for it, but also, as I mentioned earlier on, the viability, the financial viability of the site to come forward, given where it is and the costs that are associated, that have all been played out for 6 months or so in the viability assessment. To reduce the overall height and scale, we've been through hundreds of options about how to reduce it, what can be reduced, how it can be made more efficient, how the construction process can be reduced in cost, how the parking substructures can be reduced in cost and so on in the same way. It doesn't stack up financially. And the report was made available. I don't know if the members, if it gets provided openly, but that demonstrates that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. A further question, Councillor Hencher Seraphin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Looking at the setting and the design of your buildings, did you have any consideration in blending more in with the setting? Because I look at it and it's all pitched roofs rather than having a flat type of roof. Did you ever consider that?
So absolutely, and again, we have got a pitched roof. It's a mansard roof. It's not an entirely pitched roof in the same form, but it is a pitched roof to a degree. But we're looking to make the maximum space. If we were to have a pitched roof on the size that you've got next door, it would be even taller. Or if we reduce it, we have less numbers, and then it's not viable. And that's the simple one. We're in this catch-22. We've tried to make it as efficient as possible, as reduced as possible, to make this financially viable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking around the table, we might be done. Thank you very much for that. Gentlemen, can I just say that, members have asked you a lot of questions tonight, and you can understand why. This is a bit of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us in Stratford to develop this area, and they want to make sure they make good decisions and the best possible decisions in respect of design and the vision that we have for this area going forward. So thank you very much for coming along to speak to us. Thank you. Right, members, here's the opportunity now to ask for points of clarification from the officer, and also we have Alex with us, who's our urban designer, and I know that some of the questions you raised of the applicant were in respect of the design of these buildings. So let me know who'd like to start. Well, so many hands. Councillor Harvey.
Fine, thank you. It's good to have our urban designer here. I posed the question in relation to the content on page 11, and I think the answer I got to the question, has a comprehensive review been undertaken in the way that you suggest that you couldn't spot it, so to speak. The answer came back, I think, that, to be fair to the speakers, that they thought they had undertaken that review. Could you illustrate why you came to your conclusion that that gave rise to the words that are in paragraph at the top of page 11, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think where that has come from is that what I'd be expecting to see in an application is a response to some of those. If a comprehensive review has been undertaken but has not been directly articulated, then I'd also be expecting to see it coming through in the design and the narrative and the explanation of and justification for the proposals. So we have a significant amount of guidance, both at a national policy and guidance level, but also at a local level, including the SPD, of which we have 4 core framework principles and 25 key design principles for the delivery of the Canal Quarter Regeneration Zone, of which there is almost no response to within this development submission. So I think that's where I was coming from in terms of the policy and guidance point of view. In terms of the local built form assessment, that is also relating directly to some of both the national level, district level and town council level requirements in their policy for there to be a clear expression of how we're responding to the distinct local character of the site and Stratford as a whole, of which, in order to demonstrate how you're responding to that, there needs to be an understanding of what that distinct local character is. There's no evidence within the application submission of what that distinct local character is or of how that response is, other than the use of two tones of brick, but it is specifically set out in national guidance that character goes far beyond to materiality. It's expressed within the layout, the built form, the scale and the massing, the arrangements of streets and buildings, and in fact I can quote the National Design Guide, which here says characters. So this is paragraph 58 on page 16 of the National Design Guide. It says character starts to be determined by the siting of the development in the wider landscape and by the layout and grain, the pattern of streets, the landscape and spaces, the movement networks, the arrangement of development blocks. It continues to be created by the form, scale, proportions, design, materials, details, patterns and colours of buildings and landscape in the way that it creates a coherent identity for residents and communities to identify with. So that's what I'd be looking for is some understanding of what that coherent identity is and how this has been responded to in this application, which, wasn't there.
That's helpful. I have a second question.
Yeah, well, no, I will suggest. Is it in respect of this design form? It's something else. Okay. In which case, I'll go to Councillor Adam, I think.
Thank you. With regards to the form of development, let's say, I'm wondering how that relates to. I think character is the thing that was picked up on there, and I'm intrigued to see how that fits with other developments, not just in its immediate vicinity, but with regards to, say, other canal side developments potentially across the county, and also I'm aware that there is a form of development not far away within Stratford near I think the train station, which to my mind looks slightly similar, although I don't know the history of that. I'm just wondering how that fits into your assessment of the character within of this development, because it looks similar to what I've seen on other canal side developments, say in Leamington. So I'm wondering how that relates to your assessment.
Yeah, so obviously the onus is on the applicant to be able to demonstrate that assessment. If that assessment's not there, then it's very difficult for me to make my assessment. In regards to Leamington, Leamington is a very different environment to Stratford. You're looking at principally a kind of a Regency sort of development, kind of architectural style there. And also in regards to the development adjacent to the train station, again, it's for the developer to there is not in the SPD, it does not define the character of the canal regeneration zone. It does not define the character of Stratford town or the district. It's for the developer, for the applicant to undertake their own assessment, to articulate what that character is and how they are responding to it. In terms of the Berkeley Homes scheme, they've done a very comprehensive assessment in terms of their landmark building. They pick out things that are distinctive to Stratford, such as the double gable element, which you'll see on the landmark building, and features like that. There is not a similar assessment or design response within this application.
Councillor Adam, okay with that? Yeah. Then I had Councillor Eden, I think.
Thank you, Chair. With something this big, it's kind of important to try and get your head around how everything might fit, especially given the next application. I wondered whether or not, and it needn't be straight away if you haven't or need to go and find it, whether or not you've got a similar kind of view or plan of the landmark building, the one in the middle that we'll be hearing next, and then perhaps the fallback, to give us some context of how that might look.
What I do have is a slide to show the elevation of what the agent refers to as the fallback. So let me just pull that up. So that's what was granted under the prior approval application back in 2022. What I would say is that the agent believes this to represent a fallback if we were to refuse this application. In reality, in order to comply with the prior approval regulations that this was granted under, they would need to complete this development by the 1st of November this year. There are 4 conditions attached to that permission which require discharge before they progress above slab level, and we haven't had any submissions to discharge those conditions. So because of that, officer's view, or my view, is certainly that we would give that limited to no weight, because I think they haven't got very long to implement that. It's 4 stories, yeah.
I think, okay, Councillor Eden. Councillor Harvey, I had you next to Councillor Parry. I've got you down for a question as well. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you give us any advice on the degree, the balance we can draw between financial viability as one factor and all the other factors that we have to take into account, please?
So you'll be aware that viability is covered in the report, and I think it's fair to say that we don't disagree with the financial viability appraisals which have been submitted. They were independently assessed on the council's behalf by Lambert Smith Hampton, who, like I say, didn't disagree with the conclusions. I think where I fall on it is, you heard it a few times within the agent speaking slot, that they couldn't reduce the size of the scheme because it would render the scheme unviable. Obviously, the size of the scheme has determined the amount of basement parking, as an example, which is required. So who's to say, and we don't know, we don't have an alternative scheme before us, but who's to say that reducing the scale down may get rid of the need for a basement car park, which could completely change the figures. So to my mind, viability is obviously a matter which we've had regard to, but it's not something which I consider outweighs the harm which has been identified. And the reason for that is because there's no hook within the relevant policies, being CS8 and CS9, that allows us to introduce a scheme which causes harm on the basis of viability. So I don't think that there's a policy reason to use that as justification to grant the scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Now, Councillor Parry next. Thank you. And then to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder whether Alex can give us some information. In the assessment, he makes reference to the characteristic use of buff brick, which is more dominant than the red brick, which is characteristic to the town of Stratford. Can I ask this question? If the type of bricks had been the other way round, in terms of the red brick on the major part of the building with the buff brick as subservient to it, would he feel that this contradicted the character of the area, and would that have been an issue in the design and access statement?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be an obvious amendment to make. That would, if red brick is a clear, distinct characteristic of Stratford, both as a town and a district. Buff brick isn't. So to my mind, that would be a clear amendment to make. But I think it's important to bring it back to that character goes so much further than materials. Again, to quote the National Design Guide, this time paragraph 21 on page 5, it states, a well-designed place is unlikely to be achieved by focusing only on the appearance of materials and detailing of buildings. It comes about through making the right choice at all levels, including the layout or master plan, the form and scale of buildings, their appearance, landscape, materials, and their detailing. So, although that would go some way in amending it, by purely the elevation or material alone, I don't think that would be enough to demonstrate a comprehensive compliance or review of the local character.
Councillor Parry, you follow up?
If I could just, yes,
of course.
If I could just come back on that. Alex, can you advise, was any of this sort of information played back to the applicant in terms of, as part of progressive discussions, as part of the planning application, that this perhaps might have been pointed out, there needed to be greater focus on, because obviously a scheme of this scale and size takes a lot of time and there's a lot of communication between the planning departments, etc. I just would find it helpful to know what sort of dialogue may have taken place with the applicant and the team to just infer some of these issues, or was it just, as it's just come at the very end?
Yeah, thank you. So obviously, these are not my views. These are views that are set out in both the national and the local policy and guidance framework, of which publicly available documents that the applicant would have been aware of. They've also been expressed within my own personal meetings with the applicant and my own formal written consultation responses, of which the first one was probably submitted at least 12 months ago. So this isn't something that should be of any surprise to the applicant. This is basic.
Okay, Councillor Parry. Okay. At this point, if you don't mind, I'd just like to follow this theme of layout and design and detailing and landscaping, Alex, because the applicant sort of suggested this was a design that was in keeping with the character of the canal side. And, you know, when many of us look at this, we're thinking, well, you know, if you were in a canal boat in the middle of Birmingham, that's probably what it looks like, because you've got all these industrial buildings coming up at quite a height. But I think you're saying that perhaps in this location, the setting immediately adjacent to the canal with such a large face perhaps isn't what's reflected in our aspirations in the SPD. Have you got a plan that can show us where the open space is around this building, so we can look at the open space, and you could just explain to us why you're not satisfied with this building where it is, and whether or not there's an alternative location, because that's, I think, what you're suggesting to us.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think in terms of the layout of the built form, I think I'd be expecting a few things. One of the main core principles of the Canal Quarter Regeneration SPD is there's such a strong emphasis on the creation of this linear park. So if I was personally to be designing it, one of my key principles would be trying to maximise the amount of public open space that's available on the park side. Obviously, we can see that it's fairly slender, and there's areas of where the built form has kind of recessed away from the street to the north that perhaps could have been, if you could almost imagine if you flipped it and that triangular space was added onto the park side, then that you're starting to add into that. I think the second thing in terms of the layout is you'd be looking for a positive relationship to that street to the north as part of the Berkeley Homes application. So obviously it's not developed, but we have an approved scheme which could be implemented, and there's a clear relationship there between those semi-detached dwellings. They've got quite short front gardens and quite a strong relationship with the street, whereas the way that the applicant scheme has come forward is it's more or less turning its back onto the street. It's got effectively a turning servicing area that's reflecting on so whilst it's got quite a strong relationship with the canal, it's the street to the north, it's having quite a significant negative impact on. You'd be expecting it to, for example, if they were to have done an analysis of the Berkeley Homes scheme, you'd be thinking, okay, this is an established character of this street, how can we look at enhancing that?
Okay, Alex, and I just want to understand that the applicant clearly feels that the facing to the canal is actually more important because that reflects the canal side character rather than the facing of the street, which wouldn't, because then that industrial style of front may be facing away from the canal and there'd be a greater open space between the canal and the building. What's the importance of this linear area that you're talking about? Is this a pedestrianisation area, cycling and so forth?
It's in terms of along the canal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the SPD sets it out as it's both a kind of a movement and recreational corridor, but it's also a wildlife and ecological corridor. And I think what we can see here, where it's kind of minimised, and also there's when towards the west, where there's lots of footpaths and hard standing, then obviously when you're thinking about the ecological impacts of that as a wildlife corridor start to be negatively impacted. I think in terms of this as an industrial style building, the applicant hasn't submitted any evidence to suggest that this how this could be interpreted as an industrial style building. There hasn't been any analysis of the employment area as a whole and the characteristics that could bring and how that could be interpreted within this scheme. Yeah. Okay,
Alex, thank you for that. Right, I had next Councillor Passingham with a question, please.
The report says that the application fails because one of the reasons being because of unacceptable levels of light and privacy and an overbearing impact. Could you explain that, why that is?
Yes, of course. So as set out in the report, the separation distance between these two buildings, so obviously the one on the right is the one we're considering now, the one on the left is the one we'll be considering after this item, is 12.5 metres, which is considered too short of a distance to ensure that the balconies and the primary windows in those elevations won't be harmed as a result of overlooking, overshadowing, overbearing.
Is that a sort of a national urban design standard then, the distance between these sort of blocks of flats or dwellings?
Part F of our SPD sets out separation distances.
You're happy with that, Councillor Passingham? And then I had Councillor Adam, if you've still got a question.
Thank you. It may be it's an obvious question, I'm not sure, but I suppose it's how would we define a landmark building in this context, and how would proposed development around that be subject to the sort of poignancy of that landmark? I mean, I think we have an indication of our natural understanding of what a landmark is, but I suppose how does that fit within policy framework, and then how can we consider any development around that? I mean, because obviously the height is a significant part of that. So can you just elaborate on that, please?
Yes, of course. So you're correct in that there is no strict definition on what a landmark is generally in the built environment, but they're understood to be, I think as everyone in the room would understand them, to have some kind of differentiating factor. So there's two roles to landmarks, really, one of which is they tend to be a significant feature in terms of defining the character and the sense of place of a built form. The second one is that they tend to be reference points, visible reference points, wayfinding markers within the built environment that people can reference to kind of understand where they are within Stratford or any settlement. Within the Canal Quarter SPD, it does define a landmark building. So key principle 11, which is on page 39 of the SPD document, states that landmarks can exceed the height of adjacent buildings by typically 1 or 2 stories. So by doing that, it's sort of inferring that landmarks here are going to have an increased height, which is quite a classic sort of expression. If you think about historic landmark features, churches, public buildings, they tend to be of a larger, grander scale. And again, if you think about churches, they tend to have a spire that is significantly taller than the surrounding built form to create that strong differentiation. And it's not just about that differentiation, but it's also about that visibility. Whereas if there is but basically if all of the built form is of a similar scale, then to be able to define that one building it becomes more difficult.
Have a quick follow-up on that.
Yes.
Just with regards then the landmark building directly adjacent to these two, taken together. I suppose what makes that form of that building in particular? Is it the gables, for instance, that kind of characterise that? And I suppose how is that viewed from the public realm that will make that the landmark? Because presumably we can't see that from, say, further down the canal towards the town. So would that be a landmark from Timothy's Bridge Road and just on the canal, or is it a wider setting that we're considering that in?
So I wasn't involved in this scheme personally, but from going back and looking through the application documents, obviously the height, it was flagged before that there was a policy requirement for maximum residential story height of 4 stories generally, unless there's significant justification for. So obviously a 6-7 story building is above that. But then as I was talking about with character and detailing, it's about considering those elements at all levels. I do distinctly remember from looking through the documents, they did submit a very comprehensive study of Stratford and its character, and one of the defining features was this double gabled element. For example, you see it on some of the Tudor buildings at the top of Bridge Street and things like that. And it said so that was an element that they identified, and I think and then obviously they've expressed it here. There were potentially other things, but like I say, I wasn't involved in that. In terms of how it's read, the guidance document locates and it is guidance, and so obviously there's flexibility in those locations, but I think it was referenced that there were 11 landmark buildings. If every building becomes a landmark, then in some ways nothing's a landmark. Those locations, from my interpretation, again, I wasn't involved in developing the SPD, but those locations, if we can get up that plan, so you can, in lots of those, they're kind of in natural view corridors. So the blue landmark building where we are, so if you imagine if you were travelling eastwards along the canal, you get that break in the public space and you suddenly get that visibility towards the landmark. And also if you were coming eastwards down Timothy Bridge Road, and I think this is where the guidance element comes into it, because they've designed the whole building as a landmark, and there's another double gabled element that would be fronting that western extension of Timothy Bridge Road, if that makes sense. So as you were travelling eastwards in towards Stratford, it would be there in front of you. So those two elements is how those ones are viewed. But if you were to look at many of the other ones, for example, the one around the, for example, this one, if you were to follow this framework, that would be terminating a view corridor there. Similarly, this one, if you're on the canal, you'd see that one there. Similarly, this one, if you're travelling on this road, you'd see that there. Do you see what I mean? So they've all kind of, and this one here, again, if you're coming up Timothy Bridge Road, you'd see that there. So they've all kind of been strategically located at the end of view corridors. I think what's important to make about this site is there is no view corridor. There is no view corridor that this would be terminating. So yes, this is guidance, but there's a rationale behind the structure to this which doesn't correspond with the applicant.
Thank you for that, Alex. I think that's what we had. One further question, if it's a fresh issue, Councillor Scorer.
Yes, your assessment, it says concerned about the access to the basement. But does it come under building regs or building control? Does it meet that?
Mobility access is a matter that's considered by building control, but what it's important to do is try and iron those things out at planning stage, so you don't have to have a later amendment as a result of it failing building regs. So it's right to pick it up at this stage and consider that concern.
Thank you. Councillor Scorer, you have something else? Thank you.
So it would or wouldn't go through building regs at this present moment in time?
I'm not a building control officer, so I can't answer that. It's not a reason that we're recommending it for refusal on its own. It wouldn't tip the balance on its own, but it's something to be aware of as a concern.
Thank you, Richard. Right, I'm looking around, but I suspect we've probably asked as much as we're likely to ask, and I'd just like to thank Alex for joining us this evening. It's a complex application with significant implications going forward. So we can move into the discussion and debate now. So would one of the members like to start that process? Councillor Parry, thank you, and let's have some views about this application.
Right. Well, I think first of all, I would just like to say I think it's hugely disappointing that we don't have a representative here from the Town Council. This is such an important site, and we don't have a representative here from the Town Council, which would have been helpful.
Just to say, Councillor Parry, Councillor Harding has sort of indicated that he's a town councillor. Now, at some point during the debate, I'm hoping to hear from Councillor Harding.
Well, that would be good, because obviously they've made some points, and it's normal that we have a...
Hang on. Oh, you're right. You're sitting here as a district councillor, so although you are a town councillor, you're not commenting on this application from the perspective of the Town Council. So you're quite right, Councillor Parry, there's nobody speaking from the Town Council on this application. I stand corrected.
And also, it's a bit disappointing, there's no representation from the ward member either. Any comments whatsoever. And this is a hugely important site.
That's noted, by the way. Thank you.
At the end of the day, I don't think any of us, what we're looking here is we want to have whatever comes forward to be really successful, be loved for the generations to come. So I think the point of our discussions this evening are really centred on what has been discussed in terms of design and that side of things, because no one is disputing the principle of development here has already been established. It's part of the SPD for the Canal Quarter. But I think where I'm particularly coming from, we've got one opportunity to make it right, and it's got to be right, because I think whatever we decide on this development, there will be will be implicated on other schemes that come forward through the canal. Now, obviously, I'm not a design or an architect expert, so we have to go on sort of comments and advice that we've been given, and the sort of information I'm getting is it's nearly right, but it's not quite right, and part of our process, we have to make very difficult decisions, obviously. But at this moment in place, I should be very interested to hear what other people have to say. But at the end of the day, if it's not quite right on such a major, large scheme, I think perhaps some additional consideration needs to be made, and it comes back, hopefully sooner rather than later. So, from my standpoint, based on the officers' comments that have been made, I am erring to go with the officer's recommendation at this point, but I won't be making a proposal.
Right, thanks, Councillor Parry. Now, I've just been asked to make a point of clarification in respect of Councillor Harding and a declaration of interest as a town councillor. So what I'd like to do, Councillor Harding, is to invite you at this rather late stage to declare that you have an interest as a town councillor, but you could also perhaps declare that you come with an open mind to this, the consideration of this application, so that we are squeaky clean.
I'm very happy to be squeaky clean. Yes, and I would declare an interest. I wasn't aware that I had an interest, although I was at the planning meeting when this was discussed at the town council.
I think it's just an oversight,
but I do come with an open mind.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
So are you happy with that, Amy? One moment. Right, so we need to clarify whether or not you were attending, in what capacity you were attending the town council meeting at which this application was discussed, because the town council have raised an objection to this application. So you need to help us understand that. They are conferring on my right as well, just to be sure that, well, I want to be sure that we can continue with you on this committee, having perhaps been involved in the meeting that discussed this application at town council. So just bear with me. You're going to be taken out in handcuffs at this point, and Olivia's going to have a little chat with you just to clarify. At that point, we might just take a... Do you want to take a... Oh, you don't, do you, Alice? No, okay, just checking. Okay, right. So we'll just return to that point. I'd like to invite Councillor Harding to update us, please.
Right. Yeah. Having taken legal advice, I'm going to step away from this item and the following item and leave the meeting, just to make sure there's absolutely no conflict of interest.
Right, good.
Which I apologise, I wasn't aware there was one.
Yeah, well, yeah, but even if there might be one or the suggestion of one, we wish to avoid that. So thank you very much, Councillor Harding.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, go straight to jail, do not pass go.
I'm going straight to the windmill.
That's the muster point for fire. Right, so having moved on from that little issue, we've heard from Councillor Parry, and I'd invite Councillor Adam now to join the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's an interesting one, and I think it's right that we give it the weight in terms of the impact it'll be having to the area that it deserves. I must say that my personal feelings on it aren't as negative as they might be in terms of how I see the development, the form of development, and how I've seen it elsewhere in terms of canal side development, and that's, I suppose, taking a broader context of what we've seen across the county and further afield even. But I think it's right to have that context as well as a more localised one. With that in mind, I think that some of the aspects which have been raised as sort of more egregious failings against our core strategy, I don't sort of hold as much weight. That being said, I am concerned that there are technical hurdles which haven't been overcome, particularly in terms of the residential amenity and the heritage aspect, which I think I'm struggling to find a comprehensive way to resolve in terms of what we've got in front of us tonight. For me, the massing isn't quite as much of an issue, and I know that reflects the main thrust of the issues in terms of heritage, I believe. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm not as against this as I'm sure sort of some might be, and I can understand where the officers have come from to reach their decisions. But I think it's forming part of the development, which to my mind isn't as incongruous as it might be. And the only concern I have is then that we're letting sort of perfection be the enemy of the good, and that actually this is a proposed development that could still be quite comfortable within its setting when other developments forthcoming. So as I say, I think the technicalities are kind of probably throwing me slightly towards the officer's recommendations at this point, but I'm generally speaking in favour of the development and the form of development. I'm intrigued to see what others think along those lines. But yeah, I suppose those are my feelings at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. I've got Councillor Eden next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I echo both Councillor Parry, as normal, and Councillor Adams' views on this in terms of supporting the kind of proposal per se in the area. But for me, having attended the site visit and looked across the canal today at the structures opposite, I do think the part of what we've got here does fall back on that four-storey sort of guidance, if you like, and that for me is kind of quite an overriding factor. The report is very well put together, very comprehensive. We've heard from, officers who are the experts in this, and for me personally, I'm very much inclined to go along the lines of the officer's recommendation on this, and to the point, to begin things, I will propose that we do that.
So thank you, Councillor Eden. That's a proposal from you then to follow the officer's recommendation. Councillor Hencher-Seraphin, like to comment on this.
Yes, I would like to commend the officers on this report. It's very excellent, very thorough. A lot of hard work gone into it. The main issue with me would be the design of this building. Aesthetics to me is very important, and aesthetics means to me a pleasant object to look at, building, whatever it is. It doesn't fit in. It looks more industrial as it is. So I'm leaning towards the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Fleming, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm echoing sort of Councillor Adams' thoughts on it, really. When I think of what's built on the old cattle market, what's recently been built at the front of Morrison's supermarket, I don't think we can say that it's out of keeping with some of the things that are going to be built in the town. The big thing for me is not enough parking spaces, one per house. There's going to be 40-odd potential two-car households. So where are those 40-odd cars going to park? And I think that's one of the heavy things that would prevent me from backing this recommendation. I just don't see that the building isn't, unlike Councillor Hencher-Serafin, I don't think the building's ugly, I don't think it's bad. I think the industrial look isn't a bad thing. But at the same time, I'd like to see nice buildings, and I think the swap of the red and the buff would work. But in general, the big no-no for me is this parking issue, because we've got an issue, and I think it's pie in the sky to think that we're going to go down to one-car households or no-car households. So from that particular point, I'll be going along with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. If I could just quickly respond to that. I mean, one of the advantages of the development in this canal quarter is the sustainability of the area and the fact that you can walk into town and cycle very quickly, actually, just a few minutes along the canal towpath. So, you know, I can understand your concerns about the car spaces, but I think if we are going to provide the number of houses that we require in sustainable locations like our towns, then we're going to have to try and maximise the space that we have. And I would just reflect on that. I've got some further comments, but in respect of you know, trying to get as many houses as possible in close proximity to the town centre is actually quite important, in my view. Councillor Padgham.
Thank you, Chair. One thing that I do like about it, or that I think is a positive, is that it's 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, and I know that that is something that has come up, I think maybe in the housing needs survey, but certainly in the state of the district, that we weren't providing enough 1 or 2 bedroom accommodations. Developers previously were preferring sort of 3 to 4 bedroom houses, so this is a positive. And I appreciate your comments on the parking. What I would say is that I sort of agree with Bill to a certain extent, Councillor Fleming to a certain extent as well, that we are assuming that people will walk or cycle into town, but what if they don't work in Stratford town? They may need to be commuting to somewhere else, and chances are we are going to end up with a parking issue. So that would be a real concern for me, and I think it is valid to either discuss that further or perhaps ask if there was another solution to that.
Thank you. I've got, I think Councillor Passingham caught my eye first. Next. That be right? Thank you.
I'm in agreement with you, Councillor Keithley, about the. I'm in agreement with you about the sustainability aspects of just having a single parking space, and it's underground. It's not far to walk into town, and it's near the train station for commuting. So there's lots of advantages of it from that point of view. And as far as the urban design, I'm afraid that all rather washed over me. It seemed very subjective, but I do accept, I'm not an expert, and we have experts here, but I quite like the design. I do think it, well, I don't know about like it, but I think it fits in with other buildings around, and I like the way that there's this park corridor along the canal as well, and the canal facing part that we walked along this morning. So I'm quite in favour of it, and I would hope that this design could come back with overcoming some of the urban design issues that have been raised, because it's high density, which again is sustainable for this situation near the town centre. So, but I think we're going to have to vote against it for because of the recommendations of the planning officers.
Thank you, Councillor Passingham. I'm looking around the table. I think, did I have Councillor Harvey? Thank you.
I don't want to repeat what's been said elsewhere, but I was persuaded by the comments from the landscaping officer concerning the scale of this property compared with the landmark building, and I wasn't convinced, for the reasons given, why the expectation of 4 stories should be exceeded in this particular instance. We haven't mentioned the conservation officer during the discussion, but the conservation officer has concerns that we have, given that there is a piece of legislation and we are required in our decisions to have special regard to an application in relation to a conservation area. When you've got 2 officers both saying there's less than substantial harm for the reasons which have been explained to us, I will support the proposal. Having said that, I do want to see this site developed, and there is a degree of reluctance in refusing this application because, as various people have said, Councillor Passingham, 1 and 2 bedroom flats, or Councillor Pradham, and the sustainability of town centre living. But the design is such, and given the strength of a view that we've heard, is such that I don't have any regrets in casting my vote in favour of the recommendation.
Councillor Harvey, are you prepared to second the proposal that was made by Councillor Edden?
I will.
Thank you for that. Did you want to speak again, Councillor Adam?
I will do briefly, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's with listening to colleagues. I mean, my feelings are that actually the massing of this and how it fits within the context of the landscape building. I mean, I asked the officers about that specifically because I was sort of intrigued by how it's meant to be read in design terms. I feel that the fairly sort of regular linear form of it beyond the landscape building on the corner makes it actually complement that building to some extent in a way that I don't think was picked up. And I think that's part of what the speaker was talking about in terms of having it sort of descend away from it, and the relief that you'd have from the gables, I suppose, of the landscape make that part of the form of development which actually I don't have an issue with. So, and I think that's kind of what I was alluding to when I first spoke on this, is actually that part of the design doesn't really bother me in the same way that it clearly does colleagues, but I find that that's actually acceptable on the basis that this type of development, I mean, I would have expected this form of development next to the canal on the basis that the wider area sees similar sort of scale and form of houses, and that's also the type of building that you can expect to get smaller flats in, which we know we need, which is the type of density that suits the town. So that's the area I don't actually have an issue with. Now, the issues I have really that would sort of sway me towards refusal are the more technical ones based on residential amenity, which I think we can't really get around based on what's in the report. But and I mean, there's essentially looking at the recommendation, there's 4 reasons for refusal. I'm wondering if we can't tick a few off based on my view of it. I mean, it might not get support from all my colleagues, but I think it might make future applications that do come in easier to modify to something that is acceptable. So, for instance, I mean, I think the heritage aspect I do have concerns about, but I think that's tied into the massing. I think if we can accept that that the massing is acceptable on the basis of the surrounding development that will be going up, that can be resolved by any future application. And then I would like to think that the proposals is item 4 on the reasons for refusal, which go into sort of affordable housing, the mix and things like that. I think that's more of a technicality in which needs to be ticked off by legal agreement at the back end of it.
I'm just going to just pause you there a minute, if you don't mind. Are you suggesting that we water down the reasons for refusal and remove some of them? Is that what you're suggesting?
Essentially, at the moment, I think I could only justify number one, taking that out. But and again, that's my interpretation of it and where we've got the flexibility to do it. But
Yeah.
essentially, I want this site to be developed. I think that will has been expressed by members, and we need to realistically look at what we can do to make that happen from a local authority point of view, because clearly there's a lot of work that's gone in from the developers and the applicants. So that, if it were me, I'm happy to make a proposal that we refuse, but in line with items 2, 3 and 4 instead of all of the recommendations.
Right, okay. I'm not sure how to take that on board just at the moment. It's adding a layer of complexity, and clearly we're moving, it looks like we're moving towards getting to a position to vote. So members will be deciding whether or not to go with the recommendation of the officers. We've got a proposal and a seconder, so we are going to move to a vote soon. I'd just say I think that those issues that you're raising would be for a matter for further consideration in a subsequent application and discussions with the officers to address some of the issues that have been raised, is how I would see it. I'm not sure, I would just like to say, does anybody else want to speak on this, or are you happy that... Yeah, go on then. Well, I will just, if that's okay, I'll pause that. But Councillor Scorer.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's my thoughts have been said, but for me, I do like the style and design. I like the juxtaposition of the red and the brick. And when I look around Stratford, you know, with the old cattle market, the development there, but I do take what the officers have said. So in my mind, maybe just a little bit of tweaking. It just needs maybe 80% there. Just needs a little bit more to get over the line. So maybe, and again, I hear what Councillor Adam said, that you know that whether in principle I haven't got an issue with it being down there, but maybe looking at the vistas through the landmark parts around. I say just a little bit of more of tweaking. So I would then just go with the officer's recommendation.
All right, thanks, Councillor Scorer. Right, I'm going to just put my views across now, if that's okay. But and then I'm going to ask Richard to respond to your questions, Councillor Adam, in respect of the reasons for refusal. I mean, I've heard what you've all said, and you've asked some excellent questions this evening. Yeah, we do need to develop this site, and we need to get on with it. But in my heart of hearts, I'm not sure that what we see in front of us is the best solution that we can get. I think we have to accept that we're going to have to get some density. The applicant described this hinge away from the landmark building, but to me, that proposal is a very large mass. And you know, living in town, I see the sort of shadows cast by the very big buildings on the cattle market site, and I am concerned about the northern side of that and what people are looking onto that are going to live on the road the other side. I'm also slightly concerned, probably don't understand it sufficiently, is this linear corridor and just how much benefit we will get from that linear corridor if it was the right size and scale. And I think that it feels to me that this is pinched a little. However, I do also think that we're not probably a million miles away from a scheme that we want to see here. So in that respect, I shall be following the officer's recommendation. But at this point, Councillor Adam has raised the prospect of us looking at this with modified reasons for refusal. And at that point, I'll bring Richard in just to clarify what that might mean and whether or not there are any issues with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's 2 points that I want to just advise on with regard to the reasons and splitting reasons off and dropping reasons. The suggestion is that reason 1 on page 30 would fall away, but we would retain, amongst others, reason 2 on page 30. Now, members will note that both of them are objections on scale and massing under both of them. So it's the same issue, but it's having different impacts. Under reason 1, it's having an impact on the design and the character of the area, which would apply anywhere. On reason 2, it's because of the harm to Stratford's conservation area, which is a specific matter that you have to have regard to on its own, and you have to have, I think has already been said tonight, special regard to. So the two reasons, to my mind, go hand in hand, and you can't pull one away and leave the other there. If one falls, then I think it would be very hard to argue why 2 shouldn't fall. So I think those 2 stand and fall together would be my advice. The second point to raise is a very technical issue, but it's an important one. Reason 4 has been mentioned as possibly being not needed. Reason 4 is almost a catch-all that goes on any refusal that needs a 106 agreement. It's basically, for want of a better word, a space holder to reserve the council's position should it go to appeal or should it come back in, because tonight there's no 106 agreement. So if it was to be granted tonight without a 106, you wouldn't get any of the goodies that would come with the development. So that's there simply as a placeholder. So let's say we found ourselves at public inquiry, that would allow the council to fight that point or defend that point and require a 106.
Well, I'll invite you, Councillor Adam, to respond to that, and also to then say whether or not you still would like to bring forward a counter proposal to the meeting.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Richard, for going into that in depth. Just on point 4, I understood that was the reason for it being there. I think, as I said, I wasn't really expecting that to fall away at this point, but that we'd expect a future and more full application, a more complete application, let's say, to have those bottom out so that we were covered. And I think that the point that was making it difficult for me was understanding ahead of time that 1 and 2 were kind of intertwined. My personal feelings are that the heritage aspect isn't as significant as the conservation officer has made out in their professional representations, but not being a heritage officer myself, I feel that I couldn't realistically sort of remove that one from my position just as a committee member. What I was thinking, though, was that if the committee made a decision that item 1 wasn't in line with their views of the application, that would open the door to the heritage assessment being reconsidered, let's say. That was is maybe more convoluted than it's practicable, but that was the idea behind my thoughts.
But I take it you're not going to make a proposal. I mean, reading you and what you just said.
I'm still keen to, because I want to sort of push this along to an extent that enables the.
Okay, well then make the proposal.
All right, I'll make the proposal then that we refuse, but in line with reasons 2, 3, and 4.
Not reason 1.
Yes.
And you'll need a seconder. So would anybody like to second that? Councillor Passingham is seconding it. Okay. Okay, hang on a second then. Well, I need to ask, does anybody else want to speak on this matter? We have 2 proposals on the table. I'll just take some advice on which order we're going to take those in before we move on. Okay, right, all right. So I'm taking the first proposal, which is Councillor Eden's proposal, which was seconded by Councillor Harvey. And that is a proposal to accept the officer's recommendation in respect of the application 23032270 for the 4 reasons on the report. So all those in favour, please show their cards.
That's 8, Chair.
8. And those against?
2, Chair.
2. Okay, thank you. Well, that's passed. So, yeah, Right, so nothing else to do. So on that basis then, we can confirm that the application 230370 FUL is refused in line with the officer's recommendation. And can I thank you all, including the applicant and agent, for their contributions this evening. It is a complex... I beg your pardon? Yes, I realise, but the reason I'm sort of winding it up at the moment is we have a break because it's 20 to 8. So we'll just have a short break, but thank you very much. That was complex and there's a lot to consider, and it's a very important development area for us. So on that note, we'll have a 5-minute break, please, and then back to seats. Thank you. we can resume. Are you back on, Olivia? Okay, thank you all for that. So we come on to the second agenda application, which is application 2303272 FUL, which is 5 Timothy's Bridge Road. And Alice, you're taking us through this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application site, as identified by the black dot in the centre of the plan, is located in Stratford-on-Avon's built-up area boundary. The application site is outlined in red, the canal is denoted by the blue shading, and the railway line by the thick purple line. The application site forms part of the Canal Quarter Regeneration Zone, which is allocated for redevelopment under Proposal SUA1 of the Core Strategy and Policy SSB1 of the Stratford-upon-Avon NDP. This plan is taken from the Canal Quarter Regeneration Zone Framework Master Plan SPD and shows the entirety of the land allocated under Proposal SUA1 outlined in red. The yellow star is roughly the middle of the slide, identifies the location of the application site. Full planning permission is sought under this application for the erection of a wholly residential apartment block comprising of 33 1- and 2-bed units. 25% would be affordable, offered at 60% of open market value. Here you can see the site plan, which shows a linear park along the south side of the building adjacent to the canal, open space to the north of the building, and vehicular access from Timothy's Bridge Road. The internal access road would lead to a basement car park. The southern canal side elevation can be seen here. It would be 6 stories, and at its tallest, it would measure approximately 19 metres in height. It would have an approximate width of 25 metres. It would be finished in buff brick with zinc cladding to the upper floor. And just to run through the elevations, here's the eastern elevation with the canal on the left-hand side and what would be Timothy's Bridge Road on the right, the western elevation, and finally the northern elevation. So this is the elevation which would face toward Timothy's Bridge Road but be set back from it by approximately 35 metres. The slide shows the proposed development, the coloured building on the left, in the context of the application on land to the east, which members have just heard. The greyed out buildings to the left and at the back of the slide have been granted planning permission but have not yet been built out. The approved canal side elevation can be seen on the following slide. So just to reiterate, this was granted under 22/00682/Vary as a landmark building. The elevation fronting the canal would have a height of approximately 20 metres. This plan is taken from the Canal Quarter Regeneration Zone SPD and identifies locations for landmark buildings. Members will note then L is in the location of the consented building to the west of the site. No landmark is identified at the application site location, approximately where the star is located. As advised previously, parking will be provided via a basement car park, and the floor plan can be seen on this slide. And then I've just included an example of one of the floor plans here. This is the ground floor plan. So just to take you through some photos, this is taken from Timothy's Bridge Road on the vehicular and pedestrian bridge looking toward the site. The site is marked by those 2 commercial buildings which currently occupied the application site. And here we are looking a bit further along, again, so members can see the relationship of the site where the buildings are located and the commercial development to the southern side of the canal, which is generally shielded from view by the mature planting. And the 2 buildings that currently occupy the application site. Here we're still on Timothy's Bridge Road, so this is looking across the car park where we have granted that landmark building, and you can just see the side elevations of the buildings which occupy the application site there. And again, further up Timothy's Bridge Road, you can see the roof, the grey roofs of the building there, which occupy the application site. And this is that bend on Timothy's Bridge Road, which members will probably be aware of. This is taken from the canal towpath. So this is the boundary treatment between the application site and the towpath. You can see the buildings within the commercial site there. And just in the distance, the Morgan Sindall/AMEC building there. And then speaking of, this is just to show a bit more of the context of Timothy's Bridge Road. So we've got the Morgan Sindall/AMEC building on the right, and then this is looking back the other way. Members should note that there is an update on the update sheet, As per the conclusion on pages 62 and 63 of your committee agenda, the harms and benefits of the scheme have been weighed in the planning balance. The benefits are not considered to outweigh the harms identified, and so the application is recommended for refusal for the 4 reasons detailed on pages 64 and 65 of your agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alice. Okay, so we've got James Campbell and Oliver Spicer again speaking on this development. So if you'd like to come up, gentlemen, thank you. 3 minutes again, and Olivia will give you a bit of a heads up when we're running out of time. So over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a speech written for the successful outcome of the first application, so that's gone in the bin. What is very interesting is during your debate there, you very eloquently discussed the issues and how you evaluated those, and you seem to be more comfortable with the overall design, with the balance of this regeneration starting, and something being the seed for that happening. This building has the opportunity to do that also. Reviewing the comments that you made, this building is lower than the proposed site that you just refused by some way. It's smaller and lower than the landmark building. As the urban designer very clearly outlined, the key views were coming down Timothy Bridge Road, and you had the double gable facing up, so this building would not be visible from that key view, and the reason that building was a landmark, as he outlined. So, and he mentioned there weren't really any views from the canal walking up towards it, so the impact of it would be minimal. Therefore, it should be supported, this building. If I could ask for the site plan, you had a lovely site plan of the building where you can see actually the building is set back over 35 metres from Timothy Bridge Road with a public park space at the front. I think it's really important to understand that the public benefit. This is open, this land is going to be, as part of the 106, if you were to approve this, the condition, it would be approved subject to the 106 being signed, and that land is then given over to the public. It's handed over to the public body to maintain, which is completed and so on. There's a huge amount of public open space. The linear park, which runs along the front, was raised earlier, and we unfortunately weren't able to respond to it. But you'll see on the Berkeley scheme to the left, there is a 11-metre corridor, which is what we set out in the SPD to maintain. So this site and the previous one maintain that 11 metres for the benefit of the public, also the users and the people who live within the area, but also for ecological benefit. However, people are going to use it, so ecology and humans are going to mix together. There's going to be some conflict there. I think you were very comfortable towards the end of the different design and how that could complement the buildings that were already approved. I think this building does. Again, one of the reasons or comments you made were about the colour of the brick. That could be a condition added in terms of the materiality coming back to you or to the officer to deal with in terms of a red brick or a type of red brick to be discussed. More than happy, we'd be very comfortable if that was the case. Reason number 3 in here, in the refusal, doesn't apply now because the application to the east is not now approved, so the conflict in terms of loss of light is no longer applicable. We have provided a light, sun and daylight assessment which actually says all the windows pass. Those ones weren't calculated because they didn't have an assessment requirement because they weren't failing. However, we've passed that bridge now, but the remaining windows on the development have passed the daylight sunlight analysis that was provided at request of the officer and forms part of it. So that reason is purely because of the potential development that could be next door, but that now is down the road for another day for somebody else.
Okay, could you just quickly wrap up now, please, Mr. Spicer?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's lovely.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. Right, members, do you have any questions to Mr. Spicer in respect of this application, please? No questions at all? No, okay. They're exhausted. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Okay, so we have the opportunity now to... We haven't got any other speakers, have we? No. Oh, we have the opportunity to ask questions of the officers. So, Councillor Parry, please.
Thank you, Chair. The speaker highlighted that they would be prepared to accept a change of material from the buff brick to the red brick. Can the officers confirm whether this is a conditionable item, bearing in mind the proposal we have in front of us?
If it only came down to the brick being a concern, then that is something we could potentially put on. So we could do a notwithstanding the plans condition, material shall be submitted and approved in writing. But obviously, officer's perspective is that there's more issues than just the materiality. But yeah, we could do that.
Okay, Councillor. Councillor Adam, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you. As a result of the previous application not going through, am I right in understanding that the issues pertaining to residential amenity are less of an issue now, or is there still an issue in terms of the extant permission to the west?
If we could take a few minutes to discuss, because obviously the situation has changed now that the previous scheme was refused.
Yeah, of course. If you'd like to take a break, and we'll just go offline for a minute.
Yes.
Let me know when you're ready to come back on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we had a question from Councillor Adam in respect of amenity issues, and we've got a response to that question from the officer. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, we've taken a careful look at the amenity impacts in the light of the decision that was made a little while ago. However, the recommended refusal reason 3 should still stand, particularly because of the primary window-to-window distance between the site under consideration and the previously approved site. It's 12 metres, which is some way below the SPD recommendation. So we would recommend that the amenity reason stays in. It is yeah, I think I probably should explain that. We don't know what will happen. Let's say this were refused alongside the one that's already been refused. A new scheme would have to be worked up. That would either be through an appeal, or it would be through further pre-app advice and evolution of the scheme. But it's important, like the placeholder reason 4 I mentioned earlier, that the council's protected its position in order to inform those negotiations. So in order that we can negotiate, we need to have a reason that protects our position, whatever comes forward on the other site. So the two sites need to be designed in order that the amenity between them is considered properly, and the only way to do that is to have a reason as a placeholder, either at an appeal or at pre-app, so that we can ensure that those are taken into account, because once the reason falls away, then the expectation is that amenity is dealt with, but it might not be, because it could be affected by what is designed on the other site and vice versa.
Okay, well, I think Richard understands what he said. Are you happy with that, Lewis? I think
I think so.
The nub of it is that the amenity issue remains, because the application that was just been refused is potentially still, although it's been refused by us, it's still open to appeal, isn't it?
Yeah. The second part of what I said is very confusing, and it's probably not as important as the first part, which is the site to the west has substandard window-to-window distances, and that remains irrespective of the decision made a short while ago.
Yeah, which is our landmark building. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Parry.
Thank you. I just wonder whether the officers can explain on their reasons for refusal. They make reference to the scale, massing and design of the building, and in fact the 4 reasons for refusal appear to me to be a carbon copy of the previous application, and on the basis that what we have in front of us is a considerably smaller building, sort of just a bit more than a third of the size of the big one. Can the officers explain their rationale for the scale and massing and design of the building when this is significantly smaller than the one we've just refused? And also, is there a reason why the reasons for refusal are exactly the same as the previous application?
On the first query, we still have an objection as officers in respect of the scale, design and massing. So albeit it's not as wide, not quite as tall, we're still concerned with the scale of the proposal, the rationale in terms, or the justification in terms of going over 4 stories that the policy SSB1 of the NDP requires, we still don't consider is there. Because of I think the assessment is set out on page 47 of the agenda. That's relevant to this proposal, which is why it's been copied across. In terms of the reason for refusal, I think there might be a slight difference, but let me check. No, I think it is exactly the same, and it's for the reason that the concerns remain with the scale, massing and design. Its surrounding space would fail to create an attractive scheme which is sensitive to the setting and existing built form and fail to reflect the context of the locality. So whilst the two schemes are different and have clearly been assessed on their own merits, all of those concerns stand as much for this proposal as for the other one. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Alex?
Yeah, I think the only thing worth adding there is yes, the length of the building isn't as large as the previous application we've just discussed. So in some senses, the massing may be slightly reduced, but the scale is still there. It's still over 6 stories height, and if you were standing on the canal side, the sense of enclosure that you would get with that height of that building at such a close proximity to pedestrians on that space, it'd still be an excessive scale.
Okay with that, Councillor Parry? Can I? I'm just going to pick up, if that's okay, with Alex, the urban designer. Alex, I noticed some significant differences between this and the scheme to the right that we looked at in respect of the open space. And the applicant has described the amount of open space that's coming with this. And if you could turn to that plan, Alice, you will see. I don't think that was it. There was one that showed a path crossing it at a bit of an angle.
The reason I'd like to show both if possible. So if I'll show you the first one you're requesting, then I'll come back to this one because it differentiates between private and public space.
Yeah, okay.
So if we go to this site plan first, and then if we can come back to the other one.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, right, so this is the building, this is the application, the building we're considering in this application. So the applicant said, yeah, we've actually creating a load of public open space here, and you'll be able to walk across that from Timothy's Bridge Road or cycle your way across and get onto the canal side, and it provides some linear park as well. But in your report, or in the report, the summary of your main points are that the scheme fails to respond or enclose the street on the northern boundary. That's Timothy's Bridge Road. But actually what the applicant's doing is providing quite a nice bit of open space from what I can see. And it fails to open up the canal, and it doesn't demonstrate a relationship with the linear park. But the applicant has suggested to the contrary, that in fact the space in front of the building is a continuation of the linear park, and the public open space between Timothy's Bridge Road and the back of the building is a significant benefit. What are your reasons for disagreeing with that? You know, that appearance of open space coming in from Timothy's Bridge Road, Alex?
Yeah, thank you. I guess that there's a few issues here to consider. One of which is yes, we have got a continuation of that 11-metre corridor, but that is the minimum requirement, and the whole essence of the Canal Quarter Regeneration SPD is about maximising and celebrating this linear park. So. To my mind, there's a large missed opportunity that actually, if the building had been set back away from the canal and had a much stronger relationship with the street, that actually you would be giving that public open space to the canal side park, whereas at the moment it's kind of segregated to the north. And I think that then has another knock-on impact. So, for example, talking about the key principles in the Canal Quarter SPD, key principle 1 states about creating incidental public open spaces, and it specifically references that they should receive as much sun as possible over the course of a day and over much of the year. And by locating the building to the south, we've obviously got the landmark building to the west already, given that the one to the east has now fallen away, but still the proposed building and the existing building still, except for in the morning, is now good. That public open space to the north is going to be in shade for vast majority of the day and the course of the year. So by the location of the building, that's then having a negative impact on the quality of that open space.
Okay, so it seems like you're suggesting that because it's on the north side of the building, that's not going to be a particularly attractive open space. It would be better on the south side,
Exactly.
which would get all the sun during the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
If I could quickly clarify something,
Please.
Chair. So just coming back to the slide that I quickly pulled up earlier, this has been submitted with the application and denotes areas. It's not very big, but the blue essentially denotes public open space. The red, the marking on it, is private residential amenity space. So although this actually, the layout you'll see is slightly different to what we've got, but I don't think it can be assumed, given that we've got this plan and has been submitted with the application, that all of that to the north is going to be public open space. So I just wanted to flag this plan up with members so that they've got the full picture.
Yeah, okay, Alice, that's clear. I just quick follow-up to Alex, though, please. What's your expectation of the width of this linear corridor, Alex? Because it starts off by the landmark building at 11 metres, as I understand it. What's your expectation of it moving down the canal?
Yeah, thank you. I think again, going back to the SPD, and if I was to select some wording. So, for example, in the green and blue infrastructure, so, for example, paragraph 3.24 of the SPD on page 30 says the canal is the site's defining feature, but is an underused resource. New development will celebrate the canal. This will be achieved by widening the canal corridor and creating new parkland, providing ecological and leisure benefits to the town, which will be used by both residents and visitors alike. So, although there is a minimum requirement, there's nothing preventing the applicant to go beyond that. So, I think, and again, referring to that core, that key principle 1 about the creation of these incidental open spaces, I think my understanding, interpreting all of that guidance, is that there will probably be fluctuations along, so you get these kind of these nodal tangent points along the linear corridor, which, whereas it moves from more of a move, whereas at 11 metres it's principally got a movement function where people can move up and down it, whereas if it was to open out certain points, you could get some of those ecological and recreational benefits where people might pause, you know, if you had benches and street furniture that people could interact with, and I think.
Okay, Alex, thank you for that. Any further questions, members, please? No, we're all done. Okay, in which case we can move on to discussion and debate. Who would like to kick off with their thoughts and views on this application? Please, Councillor Adam.
Thank you. Following on from the sort of discussion we just had from the officers on landscape, it feels that there's a bit of a catch-22 in terms of how the developers will have approached this, and I think that's potentially what at least explains why we've got what's in front of us. In terms of looking at, say, the factoring in residential amenity, landscape and public open space, you know, if you move it away from the canal, you've got to bring it down in height and things like that, so then you have a smaller number of viable units, and then you've got to look at viability. There's an interconnection of all these elements, which in my mind starts to justify why we've got what we've got, because ultimately we've accepted the viability assessment as to how, you know, the reason for us having this scale of scheme, at least with the basement as it is. And so if we start to work on, I mean, similar to what I said before, is I don't want perfection to be the sort of enemy of the good, really, because I think ultimately we're going to have to develop this to have a degree of density that improves the number of smaller affordable dwellings that we actually want to see in the town, in the district. And if we start to talk about what would be preferable in terms of refusing this, then we start to dilute what's actually achievable. And I think the viability assessment starts to be the technical justification for that that view. So I have a bit of a concern. Again, I think a huge amount of respect for the work that's gone in from the officers on this, because I think that it does approach it in terms of what we want to see in terms of that development. But I'm just concerned that the way we're going at it, we might not get anything at this rate, when actually we've got a scheme that really has approached this, you know, with an earnest goodwill to providing, you know, what I see as relatively high design. So that came out of the discussions there, and I think it then falls back to my feelings as it was on the previous application, that the massing wasn't a huge issue from my point of view. I think that's even less of an issue now because it's a smaller building, and I think how that relates, particularly even to the heritage assets, again, I have less of an issue than the conservation officer had, and running through the list of benefits that are listed on page 63, they do, in my mind, start to outweigh the impact that would have on the conservation area, being that that's the crux of the heritage assets, not a specific heritage asset in and of itself. So I'm starting to be a bit more in favour of this. I think the residential amenity aspect does still have an issue for me in terms of the extant permission for the legacy, the building on the west side, but again, I'm starting to. I feel that we might tie ourselves in knots if we kind of just try and get everything as perfect as we can. Whereas I think actually they've put forward a scheme which is viable, provides a lot of amenity, and particularly now that the adjacent site has not got an approval which is larger, that opens that scheme up to be developed in a different way, which might provide some of the larger benefits that we would hope to see from this section of the canal quarter, particularly as at the moment the sites aren't being considered together in one application. So there's scope there to provide some of the aspects that we're lacking, as it were. So I'm much more in favour of this. I mean, I was in favour of the last one to a large extent, but even more so at the moment. That's my feelings. Happy to hear what others have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Adam. I'll just reserve my thoughts on this just for now. Councillor Parry.
Thank you. I'm feeling far more comfortable about this particular application that's come before. I think there's an element, we're never going to see the perfect solution down here, and I think this, to me, there isn't a reason for scale and mass. I know it's above the 4 floors, but it's still below the landmark building. With regard to the public amenity space, as a grandmother with 2 young boys, the one thing I have to do is to keep my grandsons out of the sunshine. We're always looking for areas to take kids that there isn't the sunshine, particularly with all the recommendations, because otherwise I'm just lashing so much sun cream on their arms and their legs. So I actually find it quite helpful that there is a public amenity space that from a sunny aspect isn't blaring with sunshine, because actually if you want the sunshine, you go down to the canal and you walk along that area, which is lovely. But quite often, mums with young babies and stuff, this is a development that we're trying to attract young professionals and young people. So 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, you know, there will be mums pushing prams, and I can assure you, if you're a mum or a grandparent pushing a pram, you do not want to be pushing it in blaring hot sunshine. So I actually think from a practical point of view, it's quite useful to have some shaded areas. I mean, that's obviously, it's a little bit more difficult from a landscaping management point of view, but I don't see this. I think because it's lower than the landmark building, I think there's been great effort to look at it, and I think there's an element, we could spend weeks months trying to see the right design come forward, and I think this is far more acceptable from my perspective, and I'm happy to propose grant.
Okay, thank you. I've got that, Councillor Parry. I'd just like to just come back, if you don't mind, with my own thoughts. I know I'd prefer, in a way, to leave it quite late, but I would say that I have these amenity concerns, and I'm not so sure that I share your view on shade, in so far as that shade under trees in a plaza or a wide space is somewhat different to shade from a building, and I would have some concerns about the shade cast by the building over the entirety of the land at the back. But that's just my sixpenneth. And I think I had before you, Councillor Harvey, I think I've got Councillor Passingham. I'll come to you in a second, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, the overbearing impact on this, I can't remember how many metres it was between the next building. Is there a way of mitigating that without them moving the whole building a few metres? Or is there other measures that can be taken that could be conditions?
I'm glad you've asked about that, because it's been on my mind since it was raised initially. And probably the best way I can phrase it is it's within your gift as decision takers to weigh things in the planning balance. That's what you do, that's what we do. And you can weigh different balance to different things. You could, for example, conclude that the public benefits of getting this site moving and getting something granted outweigh the identified harm of the proximity to the site to the west, for example. So you're still sticking to your SPD, you're still saying that 12 metres is unacceptable, but in this specific case there are other material considerations, namely the regeneration benefits of the canal quarter, that outweigh that. So you're not ignoring your SPD, you're just giving it less weight than some other public benefit, and that would be a perfectly legitimate way to do.
Councillor Passingham, are you happy with that? Okay, we had Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not as sympathetic as other councillors seem to be. We have Conservation Officer, the Urban Design Officer and the Landscape Officer all raising objections. We have a repetition, in principle at least, of Councillor Fleming's concerns about adequacy of car parking. We have the residential amenity arguments are still there. We don't have a 106 agreement in place. There is an officer recommendation when you add all things up to refuse. My concern is particularly there is a policy about 4 stories. You can only make an exception if there are explicable reasons, specific reasons, and they didn't apply in the first application. I don't think they have been made here. I am prepared to support the officer's recommendation. And I don't say that slavishly, I say that on the basis of how I appraise the information in front of me. I presume you have a proposal to grant, which hasn't yet been seconded. I propose refuse and look for a seconder.
Right, thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Fleming.
I'll second Councillor Harvey's proposition.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Okay. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak, but I think my position is that I think there's a danger of getting sort of anchored on what you see there. And I've heard a couple of councillors say we really must get something moving. But I'm not so sure that we should ignore what the officers are telling us and feel under pressure to get moving if it's not the right scheme, is my view. I'm concerned about amenity, and I'm concerned for those that live there in the landmark building and this building. and I'm concerned about the space at the back as well and the opportunity lost possibly to open up that canal side area. So I'm at the moment, I haven't heard everybody. I'd like to hear more, but I'm minded to follow the officer's recommendation, which is to refuse this, because I think that it could be better. Councillor Adam.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I said it or not, but in terms of sort of getting moving, I think part of the concern I had is not one of time, it's more that if the principle of development for the canal quarter is there and that's set out, and my concern is that by going into some of the details like we rightfully are, we might not actually find a scheme at all that's viable. I mean, in the way that I set out in my first contribution. I'm happy to second Councillor Parry. I do maintain reservations on the scheme, particularly around residential amenity. I'd be intrigued to explore if there's something we could do, like reflective material on the windows or something like that, to kind of as a condition in a way to mitigate that in some way. But in terms of the actual scheme as we see it, I do see that there is enough public benefit to outweigh the harms that have been identified, including residential amenity, so that we do maintain our policy position, and that it will enable this development to go forwards, and then a forthcoming development application for the adjacent site, I would hope would address some of the larger concerns for the development area as a whole. So that's my feeling. That's why I'll happy.
Okay, thank you for that. I would like to just ask you how you assess the public benefit aspects of it. You've said that you think the public benefit of this particular application outweigh the disbenefits and the harm. So I'd really like to understand how you're weighing up that public benefit, given the comments that I made in respect of not having to feel under pressure to make a decision when we're not sure it's exactly the right thing, and we're being guided not to, as it happens, by our professionals.
Yes, certainly. I mean, the list of benefits that have been included within the report, page 63, I take as having significant weight in terms of weighing this balance. And I think as I explained, my concern is that any further prevarication on the ideal scheme will actually start to dilute what we could expect to see on the site at all in terms of forthcoming development.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to remind all members that this is an application site that's immediately adjacent to the landmark building. Would someone else like to speak on this? Looks like Councillor Parry.
Sorry, Chair, can I just add to my proposal that I would like to, I should have mentioned it when I made the proposal, but I would be more in favour of seeing it in red brick than the buff brick.
Yeah, yes, okay, thank you for that. Could I hear from other members, or are people feeling that they are, anything to say, Councillor Scorer?
And yeah, I say it's very close again, isn't it, really? And just a couple of things I'd just like to pick up. Like Councillor Parry, I do like a bit of shade, because obviously with a receding hairline, and I don't always have my Panama hat to hand. It's not just for young mothers and grannies that like shade as well. But I think, you know, when I look at the holistic view of this, set back from Timothy Road Bridge as well, so it's not overpowering the houses on the other side of the road. I don't mind it being up close against that canal, because my view of canals are with warehouses up against the canal as well. So I think for me it sits a lot easier. So I've come down on the side of Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Councillor Scorer. Did you want to speak? Councillor Eden.
Thank you. Yeah, this one's much closer in my mind, to be perfectly honest. And I get the whole genesis beginning for this site. I think actually somewhat more begrudgingly, because I could very easily go with Councillor Parry's proposal with red brick and the like. But for me, and to be consistent and partly swayed by Councillor Keithley's thoughts and comments earlier, the 12-metre separation, the lack of sunlight, all of those 4 reasons that are there for refusal were justified by the officers as part of the questions that we asked them. And for my own consistency on this one, although much closer and begrudgingly 4 stories, I said that in the last one, I will be going with the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Harvey.
I just add one thing in response to Councillor Scorer's point about his ease with the design and its nature as and near an industrial building. My view is that a canal-side industrial warehouse or mill is fine in an industrial setting. If this was in the middle of Birmingham, that would be a different matter. If you know the Canal Street Basin and the Canal Quarter there, it's very different from the canal side in Stratford, which we're talking here about a residential area in a rural market town. That's very different from the middle of Birmingham.
I think on that point, I would like to agree with Councillor Harvey, and having visited site, my feeling is it is quite an open area, and my expectation from hearing about the vision for this area, which is going to be, so important for such a long period of time, is that we need to make the most of the canal and this linear corridor alongside the canal and this place where people will be walking. It's a very, very well used area indeed. I know from my own use of it on a very regular basis, but I'd agree with Councillor Harvey. I feel that, but my personal view is I never rush into something personally if I feel that I could get a better solution, but that's my take on it. Some of you might disagree and you feel that you need to make a decision. So if there are no further comments, I'm looking around the table, I think we can move to a vote, in which case we take the first proposal, which is Councillor Parry's. Oh, was it? Yeah. So it's Councillor Harvey's. Oh, I beg your pardon, I got that the wrong around. Okay, so we'll take Councillor Harvey has made a proposal to support the officer's recommendation. It was seconded by Councillor Fleming. Correct, okay. And that is in respect of this, the refusal of application 2303-272 5 Timothy's Bridge Road. So could I have a vote, please? I'll take a vote on that. All those in favour of that proposal to accept the officer's recommendation?
That's 6, Chair.
And those against?
That's 4, Chair.
4. So that's carried. So committee resolved to refuse application 2303-272 5 Timothy's Bridge Road in accordance with the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much, members. Okay, members, right. I've been advised that because, thank you very much if you're leaving. Thank you very much for your contributions. Yeah, of course, yeah. Thank you very much for coming along. Members, because those 2 applications took some considerable time to determine, we are running quite late. And there is a 3-hour rule. So due to the time and in accordance with the Constitution, a vote is needed to continue the meeting. Unless this vote's not carried, the remaining business will have to be considered at another planning committee meeting. Time and date to be fixed. So I'd like a proposer, please, to continue. Councillor Adam, and a seconded Councillor Eden, and a show of hands, please, to continue. Looks like we're carrying on. members in the gallery are relieved. I'm sorry those took such a long time, but I think you gathered that they were very complicated and we needed to give them a thorough examination. So let's move on then to the final agenda item, which is application 2403278 FUL, which is Hillside in Alderminster. And Joe, you would like to take us through the application when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just set it up so I can get the presentation on. There we go. The application site is situated within the Alderminster at Hillside, number 64 New Road, as indicated by the black dot before you. It should be noted that the site is also contained within the Feldon SLA, specifically the Lias Uplands. The plan before you shows the proposed application site as demarcated by the red line boundary. The application property is part of a pair of semi-detached dwellings on the eastern approach to the village. I do apologise. There we go. To the front and rear of the dwellings are open fields and either side is established vegetation, with the closest neighbouring property located approximately 20 metres to the east. Planning permission is sought for the demolition of the single-storey outbuilding and the erection of a two-storey single-storey side extension. So just for context, as you can see, you have the existing elevations shown above and the proposed elevations below. So this is the existing dwelling with the extension. Just make sure my hour is working, yeah. And this is a two-storey element here with the one-storey single element to the side. These are the existing and proposed floor plans. So it gives you context. Above is the existing floor plans of the dwelling with the outbuilding to the side, and these are the proposed ground floor plans if approved. This is the dwellings in question with the neighbouring property. So you can see this is the outbuild to the side extension, to the side, sorry. This is the extension that was approved previously, and this is the dwelling in half. This is the neighbouring property. This is the rear elevation to give some context. Once again, you see the outbuilding to the left-hand side, and obviously the rear of the dwelling. And this gives you further context. As you can see, the neighbouring property does have a side extension, which is referenced within the report. There are no updates, and as set out in the officer's report, the proposed extensions, by virtue of their size and design, would enlarge and dominate the existing dwelling at the detriment of the character and appearance of the host dwelling, the immediate street scene, and a special landscape area. Officer recommendation is therefore for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Joe. So we have some speakers this evening on this application. So I'd like to invite Councillor Curtis, please, first, of Alderminster Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor Curtis. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you know the form, Councillor Curtis. You have 3 minutes as you're speaking on behalf of the Parish Council, and Olivia will give you the nod when you're coming to the end.
So yes, you said I'm speaking
when you're
as
ready.
Chair of Alderminster, not as District Councillor.
That's right.
I also live in the village, so I don't know if I should declare an interest here.
You're a public speaker, so you can do, but that's fine.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, so when you're ready.
Thank you very much. So there is strong support from the Parish Council for this application. There is support from the immediate neighbours, and there are no objections. Alderminster is a vibrant village with many community groups, and the opportunity to improve existing housing, making it attractive for families, is welcomed by the Parish Council. The property is described as being on the approach into the village, on the eastern approach to the village, and at the entrance to the village. And these slides may give helpful context. Slide 1 shows the entrance to the village on the new road, and behind it the extensive barn conversions with a large double garage outside the footprint of the original building. Slides 2 and 3 give more detail of this development. I'm just running through these quickly. 4 and 5 show the original farmhouse and, for context, a large detached house typical of other properties on the new road. Slide 6 shows the property adjacent to the applicant. So committee will now see that the applicant's property is some 550 metres from the Alderminster sign rather than at the entrance to the village. Slide 7 is the 1960s village hall just past the applicant's site. 8 is the electricity substation opposite the village hall. And 9, 10 and 11 are illustrative of the varied street scene on New Road. Parish Council believes this application is in accord with Policy CS9 and would improve the quality of the public realm, and with Policy CS20, and that the alterations would be of an appropriate scale and subservient to the existing building. Parish Council does not agree with the interpretation of Policy CS12. The overall width of the built-up footprint would be reduced, and the existing corrugated iron shack, not of great architectural merit, would be removed. We do not agree that this will result in harm to the character of the property and surrounding landscape. To give further context, around 20 cottages were built for Alscott estate workers, small 2 up, 2 down, not suitable as modern family homes. 18 have had extensions, at least doubling their size, making them suitable for contemporary family life, attracting families to the village, helping sustain a vibrant rural community. I'm perplexed to read the application properties on Old Road are within a central built-up position in the village. The cottages on Old Road back onto open fields and the River Stour. It would be news to me and my neighbours that we live within a central built-up position. In summary, Parish Council supports this application. It will create an attractive home, welcoming a new family into our village. The extension will be sympathetic and subservient to the existing property. The overall width of the built environment will be reduced, and a temporary building of dubious architectural merit will be removed. I respectfully ask committee to grant this application. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Councillor Curtis. Members, do we have any questions for Councillor Curtis? Yes, Councillor Hencher-Seraphin.
Somebody has to. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Councillor.
Good evening.
You say it's a new family coming into the village?
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Parry, please. Yes, okay.
It's all right, it's that time of the evening. Good evening.
Good evening,
Councillor Curtis. Obviously, we've got no representation on the planning application from Councillor Skinner. Can you advise, I mean, I'm sure it would just be helpful to know whether the applicants have liaised with the ward member and whether there were any views by the ward member. I'm sure he attends the parish council meetings regularly.
Councillor Skinner, I know, is very busy at present, and that's one of the reasons I'm here presenting for the applicants. The applicants have emailed Councillor Skinner, but unfortunately he hasn't been able to reply yet.
Councillor Parry, that okay? Anybody else got a question? Councillor Fleming.
Yeah, what's the purpose of that small shack that you described as a shack, so I'm going to carry on with that.
To be honest, I don't know. I imagine it was built as an outbuilding many, many years ago. It's in a state of fair dilapidation now, though.
Yes, of course.
So it has no architectural value, and it doesn't actually have a purpose nowadays, so, you know, so demolishing it's not going to affect or hurt anybody in that respect.
That is a question you may wish to put to the applicant, but my understanding is that it doesn't really have any architectural value. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Anybody else? I've got a question in respect of the location of this property on New Road and how far into the village it is. And I wondered if, Joe, you would be kind enough to put the plan up for us, which shows the location. So you commented on the number of properties that you passed before you got the street scene. So could you just perhaps, that's probably not big enough scale, is it? Can you show us New Road, Joe, and where you come in, where the village hall is it, you said, and the substation and all this other?
Yes.
Would that, yeah, is that possible? Yeah, and then Councillor Curtis can help us understand where it is in relation to the kind of entrance to the village if you're coming in from New Road.
So New Road comes from the right-hand side of the screen. And Joe, if you can put your cursor on the barn development, which is further to the right. No, keep going. Keep going. That's, yes, so that's the entrance, that's where the sign Alderminster stands, and that's where that Class Q development is taking place. Then on the right-hand side of the road, as you drop down into the village, there's a number, there are about 7, I think, fairly substantial detached houses. And I think Joe's cursor a little bit further down towards the main road, the A3400, I think it's about there-ish. It's quite difficult to tell, but I think it's...
Okay, well,
so it's fairly near... I mean, the village hall, you could suggest, is one of the hearts of the village hall and the church. It's pretty much adjacent. So I would say it's, given that Alderminster is a fairly linear settlement, it's nearer the centre than the periphery.
And when you look out the back, did you say you're looking out over fields? Is that what you said?
With respect to the houses, the extensions that have been made on the old road, it says they're within a central built-up position. That's the old road there. Whereas, as you can see, it's not really terribly built up around there because it does look out onto open fields.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Just helps us understand where it is in relation to the entrance to the village when you're coming in from that side.
It's about, I pasted out, and it's about 550 metres.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any further questions for Councillor Curtis? No, I think that's fine. Thank you very much for your contribution this evening.
Thank you all for your patience and your time. Thank you.
Thank you for yours, because you waited a long time. We have the speakers, Ian and Catherine Hammond now. They're the applicants, and the architect is Sylvia, is it Boev? Sylvia Boev. So you have 3 minutes to talk us through your application. How do you think you're going to play this? Yeah, it's the right-hand. It's the right-hand side. The little red mark thing comes on. How do you want to do this? Are you going to speak for 3 minutes?
Yes, I will be speaking.
You're speaking, so then we can ask questions after. Thank you. So when you're ready, and about 30 seconds from the end, Olivia will give you a nod.
Thank you. We are the proposed purchasers pre-exchange, and we rent locally, addressing all grounds for refusal. CS12, the SLA designation should not be seen as a complete restriction on development. The cottage is near the bottom of a steep gradient, partially shielded by mature trees. The extended cottage will not harm the distinct character and appearance of New Road, comprising mostly large properties in various styles on open plots. Most recently, Hill Farm Barn development under construction also sits within Feldon SLA. This first application to extend Hillside in 32 years is not at all suggestive of a cumulative decline in the quality of the landscape. Its spacious plot would not be diminished in any way. CS5, our proposal is a modest domestic extension which would significantly enhance the street scene and overall landscape. As a side extension set within existing dimensions, it would not be any more visible from the approach due to gradient, winding road and foliage. It is in the local interest to provide a dwelling for a local family who will contribute to village life. We comply with the other economic, social and environmental objectives of NPFF. CS9 and CS20. The size and scale of the extension is proportionate and appropriate for the large plot. It does not double the cottage in its 1990s form. We've reduced the width by 2 metres. The double and single extensions combined would occupy about half the width of the existing green outbuilding and create new space. The precedent slides illustrate approved extensions to numerous period semis, which more than double their original. 13 Shipston Road postdates the core strategy and is almost double our width. The slides illustrate large and prominent developments at the village gateways, including the aforementioned Hill Barn Farms on New Road in an open, prominent, hilly position. Yew Tree Cottage was also built after the adoption of the core strategy in the rear garden of Mulberry Cottage, New Road, on a smaller plot. Previous planning decisions have not required subservient or matching extensions in scale or design, producing visually unique dwellings which do not conform to any particular planning principles. Our proposed use of materials and style are consistent and complementary to both the original and the adjoining number 65. Their proposed extension, if granted, will rebalance the cottages with one another, though the imbalance between them has existed for 30 years. Our extension is intentionally in line with the main cottage. Together with a
30
coherent
seconds.
limited palette, this ensures it's non-dominant. Due to low ceiling heights, a setback would require unattractive gable roof and dormers, which would not preserve a subservient roofline, nor be in keeping with current style. The current cottage is a holiday let, small, dated and unsuited for modern families. We will remove the outbuilding and create off-road parking, improving landscaping and retaining fruit trees. It's carefully thought through family extensions, attractive long-term family home, suitable for later years. We have overwhelming support from the neighbours and the parish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs Hammond. Members, do you have any questions in respect of the plans? Yeah, Councillor Hencher-Seraphin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. So how many bedrooms has the existing building got?
The existing cottage has 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And if I may say, no upstairs bathroom.
Yeah.
Which is
Can I ask you how many children you've got?
I'm the applicant rather than the architect.
Oh, sorry.
We have 2 children.
You have 2 children?
Yes.
Yeah, so, okay, for modern day living, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I just say, I referred to precedent slides, and I omitted to say at the outset of my presentation that we submitted some precedent slides of various photographs, and I was hoping they would be played.
May I just say that they were played, but also I did request that the slides should be told when they would be switched over. I have that in the email writing.
Yeah, so, were they?
They were shown, yeah.
They were being shown.
Thank you, that's absolutely fine.
At the beginning of this meeting, we made some declarations, and one of those declarations was we had received your email, and I think most councillors would have had a look at your email, and I think that contained some slides of other properties, so I think you can be assured that we're not ignoring that. Yeah, councillors, Councillor Fleming.
Good evening. I did ask your parish councillor about the shack. He called it a shack. So what purpose does it have, and is it of any value to you in the state that it's in at the moment?
Thank you very much. It's currently a hobby room. The estate agent particulars described it as a hobby games room, but also stated that it may be suitable for a home office or further living space. Unfortunately, the shed or outbuilding is in a very, very poor state of repair. Although there is heating, it is not insulated. It's made of corrugated iron, and we have explored the possibility of retaining it as some sort of hobby room at the rear of the garden, but it would, I've been advised it would collapse on lifting, and it's not capable of being dismantled and reassembled because of the way it's put together and painted.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking around, there aren't many. You did mention when you were explaining your proposal that the extension was complementary to number 65. Could you help us understand that, how that is? I don't know whether Joe's got... Is number 65 your next door neighbour?
Yes, it is.
So if we could see the proposed scheme alongside the neighbour. So just talk us through that. You haven't had an objection from the neighbour either, have you?
No, certainly not.
Yep.
We've had support.
Okay, just talk us through how it's complementary.
We'll be retaining the existing brickwork insofar as we're able to. Our second application has proceeded along the lines of a render and coin in the light of indicated refusal to our first application, which was on a reclaimed brick basis to match the existing old style. It's complementary in the sense that it is proportionate in design and scale.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Parry.
Hello and good evening. Thank you for being so patient this evening. This may be a question for your architect. And I would just like some assistance in the rationale behind the two-storey extension not sitting back a bit from the front door elevation, because you've got because of the difference in the roof line, and normally when you have an extension, it kind of is subservient to the main host dwelling. So I would just find that helpful from an architectural design perspective. Thank you.
Sure. So obviously we understand the fact that it has to be subservient to the main building. The problem is the cottage is extremely low, ground and first floor. So for us to lower the roof line and set back the extension means that we actually cannot make the roof work in the same form as the cottages are at the moment. So then we will have to do a gable end roof if we set back the extension, which is one of the, for example, Orchard House. If you go back to the slides, please, it's towards maybe slide 3 of our presentation.
Right.
Slide 2 or 3. We would have had to do this form of roof in order to make the extension set back from the line of the house. So we had to make a choice whether we make the roof subservient to follow the same roof line as the cottage, or we produce a gable end roof similar to this house. In our opinion, it was more important to preserve the line of the roof in the design of the cottages rather than this. So we had to make a considerable, a choice architecturally, which one is more in keeping with the cottage design.
Happy with that? Okay. Can I just ask a follow-up question to Councillor Hencher-Seraphin? He asked you how many bedrooms the very small cottage had got now, and I think you said 3. And what will you end up with if this application were to be passed?
If this application were passed, we'd be maintaining the 3 bedrooms by, the proposal is to knock through the existing 2 small bedrooms on the left and to create a master, and then to have 2 newly created bedrooms, and a Jack and Jill as the bathroom is the proposal for our children, above the, on the first floor.
It's difficult for me to see from here. My eyesight isn't good enough to see, but the existing bedrooms you're indicating to us perhaps are quite small, are they?
Yes. Yes, they are.
They are. Yes?
So yes, we're creating one larger bedroom, which will allow a bit of space for study as well. We're also creating a downstairs home office, because both applicants occasionally work from home. So we thought that was important. So the bedrooms currently are very small, so we're creating much more comfortable bedrooms they can live in. There's no bathrooms upstairs, so we're adding a family bathroom and an ensuite.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
If I may also add, sorry, and in the master area, we envisage a wardrobe.
Yeah, to put your clothes.
Clothing area.
Yeah, walk-in wardrobe. Yeah, okay. Are we done? Look, thank you ever so much for your patience tonight. I'm sorry it's run so late, but thank you for your contributions and helping us understand your application. Members, we are on points of clarification. Thank you. Councillor Padgham.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask, just looking at the point on page 75 about the natural environment, and the County Council ecologist has made some recommendations, and if we were minded to grant would we be able to condition the notes about the birds and bats and protected species, please?
So what the county ecologist has actually recommended is an advice note, so it wouldn't be in essence a condition. A note would be put on regarding protected species. I would also like to state that protected species are covered under separate legislation. So in all honesty, it's to basically to make sure if any works were undertaken, the developer, the applicants, the owners know that the harm should not commence to protected species, but it wouldn't be in condition as such.
Councillor, happy with that? Yep. Okay, Councillor Eden, please.
Sorry to prolong your evening. Joe, in your conclusion and in the reason for refusal, you're stating CS5, and I've looked through the report about 10 times, and it's very late, and I can't see where that's mentioned and what that might be. So could you just help me understand that, please?
CS5 really, in essence, is a character proposal. So I think what would probably have happened in the report, it's been sort of missed out, unfortunately, on the design and distinctive of the character of the area. So then, obviously, it comes into the final conclusion of it. So ultimately, it would be CS5, CS9, CS12, because of the special landscape area, and CS20. So it's an overall conclusive bit, but I'll be honest, I should imagine the report. I should probably highlight that I wasn't the officer dealing with this application, but I should imagine the officer itself would have just, it's a missed typo, unfortunately.
Any further points of clarification? Can I ask you one, Joe, please? It seems to me like this, in your opinion, is just too big. Is there a size of extension that you feel would I mean, it's a difficult question for me to ask, really, isn't it? But is there something that you feel would be more sympathetic?
I'll be honest, Karen, so I can't really answer that question, because the honest truth is, as officers,
coming forward.
It's a different assessment.
I understand that. Yeah, it wasn't a good question, Councillor Harvey. Okay, all right. No further questions. Thank you. In which case, we can move to discussion and debate. Councillor Harvey wants to set us off.
Thank you very much. I'm the ward member for Treddington. Alderminster falls in Quinton ward, so it's adjacent to my ward. I know this road, I won't say quite intimately, but the first thing to appreciate is that, for those who don't know Alderminster, it's a ribbon settlement. It lies up and down the A3400. New Road is a side chute, leads off to the Banbury Road, Stratford to Banbury Road, and on to Loxley and Wellesbourne and Sainsbury's if you're going there. As far as I can see, I'm usually accused of being too sympathetic to officers' recommendations, particularly where an officer is recommending a refuse. In this instance, I'm 180 degrees in the opposite direction. I can't see an overwhelming reason not to approve this. In fact, I can see positive reasons to approve it, because amongst other things, the plot is big enough to take the extension without the plot then feeling cramped, is number one. Number two is that abomination of a shack, excuse me, would go. I mean, that's the sort of building is put up after the First World War as a memorial type shed. It's an abomination in that street. It is an eyesore along that street. If we're talking about the quality of the street scene, the removal of that shed would be an advantage. We're turning, in approving this proposal, if we were, we're turning a house which is inadequate in terms of standards and amenities into something which is appropriate. It has local support. I'm a passionate one to say that planning is not a popularity contest. Fine. But in this instance, it has the support of the neighbours, it has the support of the parish council. There are no objections. As far as I can see, This application deserves to be granted. I propose grant.
Thank you. I'll accept that as a proposal to grant, which is at odds with the recommendation from the office, because they're looking at policy issues when they make the recommendations. What I would say in response to your speech is that, you know, one person's eyesore could be another person's part of the rural character since the Second World War. I would just say that. Not that I'm suggesting that, I'm just saying another person might say it.
And I wouldn't suggest that some people are deluded.
Councillor Henshaw-Seraphin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I don't see any reason to go with the officer's recommendation. It's for modern living. It'll give the family a better standard of living, which is what we all strive for. So I'll second Councillor Harvey's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw-Seraphin. Councillor Adam next.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've ever heard Councillor Harvey speak with such passion.
Against a recommendation.
No, it was encouraging because I've got a similar feeling. I was put in mind when looking at this of a previous extension application that we did not that long ago, and one of my questions was why the ridge line wasn't set down, and essentially the argument was, well, some situations warrant a different approach to make sure that the character of the area is maintained. I think that type of discretion is what we should be applying here. I appreciate that it's a large extension, but it's clearly a very small house, and actually the approach, architecturally speaking, seems sensitive. So I'm fully in support of the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Eden.
Yes.
Thank you. And
I've got some planning reasons if you want them.
No, it's 9:15.
Okay, fine.
Would anyone else like to speak? No, everyone's shaking their heads. What I would say is that, yeah, I mean, you know, the office has put a report together based upon policy issues, and we have to weigh that in the balance. But in this particular case, I can see we've got a very small house and we can turn it into a family home, and there's some precedents around that village where similar developments taken place. But it's for us to weigh that up. That's why this application has come to committee. It's a good report from the officers, and it's set out policy issues for us and reasons why they suggest a refusal. However, I have a proposal from Councillor Harvey to approve this application, contrary to the officer's recommendation. And I have a... Sorry? So hang on a second, I've been cut off in mid-flight. Right, so I'm being advised that we need to think about the conditions, if there are some. So would you like to comment on that, Joe? In the event that the committee decides to approve this, what conditions are we talking about?
The standard time condition of 3 years, in accordance with the plans. However, obviously it's members' discretion. I would recommend a schedule materials condition for 2 reasons. One, the application form says in keeping with the original dwelling, and as the applicants quite rightly alluded, they would try and keep as much bricks as possible. So I think it would just be beneficial to have a schedule of materials so that we can ensure the materials are definitely in keeping. But obviously, members may choose that they wish to just to keep in accordance with the application form as submitted.
You can
confirm the planning reasons.
Yeah, well, you need. Yeah, please. Then you'd need to ask Councillor Harvey. I think, would you? He's the proposer.
Well, no, I've been making notes of what all the councillors have said. So,
thank you, Richard.
If members are determined to grant it, the reasons that I've heard why they would do that are threefold. The plot is large enough to take an extension of this size. The removal of the existing shed is a visual benefit, and the drop down and setback proposed is enough in this particular circumstance.
Okay, right, so we have a proposal to grant this application subject to conditions that we've discussed, and the wording for those conditions is to be delegated to the officers. So I'd like to ask Councillor Harvey, are you happy with that?
Delighted.
Delighted. He's delighted. And Councillor Hencher-Seraphin, I am being held to the toes to the fire tonight, aren't I? Councillor Hencher-Seraphin. That's why they're here. Right, okay, so on that basis then, I'd like to move to a vote. So all those in favour of that proposal to grant, I'd best to read it out, 2403278, Hillside 64 New Road, please show hands. Show
That's
the card.
unanimous, Chair.
Thank goodness. Thank you very much indeed. Committee's resolved to grant the application 24. Excuse me, please, we haven't finished. 03278. Thank you very much. And thank you also to the applicants and to Councillor Curtis for helping us to understand that application. So, moving back to the agenda, I think, is it right to say is any other business?
No
urgent business. In which case, we can close the meeting. Thank you all for your participation. Hey?